Hi, I'm John. The autumn sun shone through the tall oak trees, casting soft shadows on our large family estate. Today, the place was filled with the chatter of relatives as we held our annual family reunion. The warm air smelled of roasting meat and fresh pie. My wife, Anna, who was very pregnant and glowing, stood beside me, smiling as we greeted cousins, uncles, and aunts arriving in large groups. "Honey, isn't it wonderful to have everyone here?" I asked. Anna squeezed my hand, her eyes scanning the crowd. "It is, but stay close. You know how your mom can be," she whispered. I noticed my mother, Helen, moving through the crowd, her eyes sharp and observant. As the day went on, the polite greetings turned into deeper conversations. Julia, my cheerful sister-in-law, joined Anna and me near the edge of the garden, offering some relief from my mother's watchful gaze. "So, John, that new case you're working on sounds tough, huh?" Julia asked, trying to shift the topic, which I appreciated. "Yeah, it's complicated, but it's nothing compared to handling family dynamics," I joked, though my eyes drifted toward where my mother was standing with my aunts, occasionally glancing at us. Anna noticed and tensed. "I wish she would just say what's on her mind. This silent judgment is exhausting," she muttered. "She just wants what's best for me, or at least that's what she thinks," I sighed. As the sun began to set, everyone gathered around a long table on the lawn for dinner. The air was filled with the sound of conversation, the clinking of silverware, and glasses raised in toasts. It was almost perfect, until my mother sat directly across from Anna and me. "John, I've noticed you've been busy with work lately. I hope you're still making time to ensure Anna is comfortable," Helen said, her voice sharp enough to make a few relatives stop eating for a moment. "Mom, Anna's doing great, right, dear?" I said, placing my hand on Anna's. "Yes, Helen, I'm fine and capable of looking after myself, but thank you for your concern," Anna replied, politely but firmly. Helen's lips thinned as she paused, her fork in the air. "Well, with the baby coming, you can't be too careful. I read an article the other day about how important it is for expectant mothers to avoid stress." "Really, Helen, I'm fine. John's been wonderful, and Julia has been a great help, too," Anna said, trying to shift the conversation. Julia quickly caught on and jumped in. "Absolutely, and wait till you see the nursery we've been working on. John, maybe you should show your mom the photos. It's coming together really nicely." And with that, the dinner continued. Helen's comments became sharper with each passing moment, subtly criticizing Anna's choices, from her diet to her decision to keep working late into her pregnancy. The tension at the table grew, and relatives exchanged uncomfortable glances. Finally, I stood up, tapping my glass to get everyone's attention. "I'd like to propose a toast," I said, "to family, by blood and by bond. May we always support and uplift each other, no matter what." Everyone raised their glasses in agreement, and for a brief moment, the mood lightened, but Helen's tight smile as she sipped her wine told me that the evening wasn't going to end peacefully. As the sky darkened, I had a feeling the real trouble was yet to come. Later in the evening, the warm atmosphere of the reunion started to fade, replaced by unease. The laughter and happy conversations that had filled the grand hall earlier were now replaced with a tense silence as we all moved toward the dining area for dessert. "Anna, wait till you try the lemon tart I brought. It's Julia's favorite," Aunt Margie said brightly, trying to lift the mood. "Oh, I'm sure it's wonderful. Julia's been talking about your baking all day," Anna replied, smiling as she linked arms with Julia. The two of them headed upstairs together, their dresses similar in style. But behind them, Helen's eyes narrowed as she mistook Julia for Anna. Her steps quickened, driven by a mix of resentment and a misguided sense of protectiveness. "I need to speak with you now, Anna," Helen called out, her voice sharp and urgent, but she was really calling out to Julia. Julia turned around, confused. "Helen, I think you," she started, but before she could finish, Helen, acting on impulse, pushed Julia. Thinking it was Anna, Julia lost her balance and fell down the stairs. The sound of her fall filled the hall, followed by horrified gasps as she hit the ground with a thud. "Julia!" Anna screamed, rushing down the stairs as the family stood in shock. Helen froze at the top of the staircase, her face pale as she realized the terrible mistake she had made. I pushed through the crowd, my instincts as a lawyer kicking in despite the personal horror unfolding in front of me. "Someone call an ambulance," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. John's command cut through the chaos as he knelt beside Julia, assessing her injuries. "Why would you do this, Helen? She's your niece. Anna's voice trembled with a mix of rage and fear. Helen, flustered and stammering, waved her hands helplessly. I thought she was you. I just wanted to talk. By pushing her down the stairs? John's voice was cold, his eyes searching his mother's face for an explanation that made sense. Moments later, Julia was taken away on a stretcher, and the house fell into a heavy silence. John pulled Helen aside, his tone a mix of disbelief and authority. What's going on, Mom? Your behavior tonight wasn't just out of line, it was dangerous. What did you think Aita was going to do? It's all those articles and talk shows, Helen muttered, wringing her hands. They say some women trap men with pregnancies. I thought she was manipulating you. Manipulating me? Anna's my wife. We're expecting a baby together. How could you believe such nonsense about her? John's frustration mounted as he ran a hand through his hair, struggling to understand how the mother he once knew had become someone driven to hurt out of irrational fears. I got scared, and seeing her, or who I thought was her, brought it all up, Helen admitted, her voice breaking. John shook his head, trying to process her words. Anna needs me, and Julia deserves justice. We're going to sort this out, but right now, I can't even look at you. He turned back to Anna, who stood by the door, her eyes red and swollen from tears. John's resolve hardened as they both waited for news about Julia's condition. The night air felt heavy with everything left unsaid, and the trust that had once bonded the family now lay shattered. The joyful reunion had dissolved into a harsh, sobering reality. I'm not implying anything, I've seen it. The cake incident was just the beginning. Why do you favor Maddie over Sophie? I pressed, feeling a mix of anger and sadness. Linda hesitated, her facade cracking. It's complicated, Hannah, you wouldn't understand. I need to understand, Linda, for Sophie's sake. She's your granddaughter too, I said, my resolve strengthening. The conversation was tense, with Linda alternating between denial and vague explanations. I stood my ground, making it clear that this behavior had to change. As I left the cafe, I felt a mix of emotions. The confrontation had been difficult but necessary. I had stood up for my daughter, and that was what mattered. Now, it was up to Linda to reflect on her actions and make amends, but deep down, I knew this was just the beginning of a longer journey. At the annual family gathering, the atmosphere was festive, but I was a bundle of nerves. As I moved through the crowd, making small talk, my eyes were constantly on Linda, waiting for the right moment. She was laughing and chatting, seemingly carefree, which only strengthened my resolve. Finally, I found my chance. Linda was alone, refilling her drink. I took a deep breath and went up to Linda. Linda, can we talk in private? I asked. She looked surprised but nodded and followed me to a quieter corner of the room. I want to talk about Sophie and Maddie, I started. I've noticed that you treat them very differently. It's not fair to Sophie. Linda looked defensive. You're imagining things. Hannah, this is ridiculous. No, I'm not. Others have noticed too. The way you focus on Maddie and barely acknowledge Sophie is clear as day. It's hurting Sophie, and I won't stand for it. The conversation was intense. Linda kept denying and making weak excuses, but I stood firm, presenting all the evidence I had collected. As our voices got louder, some family members started to listen in, moving closer to hear. This needs to stop. Linda, you're playing favorites, and it's harmful, I said, my voice rising with emotion. Finally, Linda's facade cracked. All right, maybe I've been more attentive to Maddie, but it's only because she needs more support. That's no excuse for neglecting Sophie, I said. She's your granddaughter too. The room fell silent as family members listened closely. Linda looked around, realizing her actions were being exposed. I didn't mean to hurt anyone, she stammered, her voice shaky. It's not just about intention, Linda, it's about impact. Your actions have consequences, I said. Linda tried to apologize and make excuses, but it was too late. The truth was out. As the confrontation ended, the family buzzed with whispers and shock. It was clear they saw Linda in a new light. In the days that followed, I noticed a change. Linda became more isolated, and her usual charm couldn't hide the truth revealed at the gathering. People started treating me with more respect, recognizing the strength it took to stand up for my daughter. Sophie, blissfully unaware of the details, seemed happier and more at ease. That was what mattered most to me. The confrontation had been tough, but it opened the family's eyes to Linda's true colors. It was a turning point that I hoped would lead to a healthier and more honest family dynamic in the future. In the aftermath of the confrontation with Linda, my life began to change significantly. My career as a graphic designer took off with new creativity and recognition. Clients were thrilled with my work, leading to more referrals and exciting projects. More importantly, Sophie and I found a deeper sense of happiness and peace in our daily lives. Her laughter filled our home, showing how much our lives had improved. "Mom, you're the coolest mom ever. Look at all these people loving your designs," Sophie said one evening, her eyes wide with excitement as she looked at my social media feed. I smiled, feeling a strong sense of accomplishment. We make a great team, don't we, sweetie? Together, we can achieve anything. Meanwhile, Linda's situation within the family was changing drastically. The once respected matriarch was now facing the consequences of her actions. I heard about her struggles from family members, who spoke with varying degrees of pity and disdain. Linda tried to organize family events, but the responses were often lukewarm. Invitations were politely declined, and her calls and messages often went unanswered. At a family barbecue, I saw firsthand how Linda's status had fallen. She tried to mingle, but people responded with polite nods and quick exits. Gone were the days when family members sought her advice or laughed at her jokes. Instead, they exchanged uncomfortable glances and found reasons to walk away. "Did you see how Aunt Linda was practically ignored when she tried to join the card game?" one of my cousins whispered to me. "Yeah, it's sad, but after what happened with Sophie and me, people are seeing her true colors," I replied, feeling a mix of vindication and sadness about the situation. The change in how the family treated me was noticeable. I went from being just Linda's daughter-in-law to being seen as a strong, independent person who stood up for her child. My opinions were valued, and my company was appreciated, a sharp contrast to Linda's growing isolation. As Sophie's next birthday approached, I was determined to make it special and drama-free. I organized a small, intimate party at our home. The joy and laughter that filled our house that day were a far cry from the previous year's chaos. "This is the best birthday ever, Mom, you're the best," Sophie said, surrounded by her friends. I felt an overwhelming sense of pride and relief. We had not only overcome the challenges of the past, but had emerged stronger and happier. That night, after the guests had left and Sophie was tucked into bed, I sat alone, reflecting on the past year. It had been a journey of immense growth and empowerment. Standing up to Linda had been tough, but it had paved the way for a new life where Sophie and I could thrive without manipulation and favoritism. A text from Linda interrupted my thoughts. "I realize I've lost a lot. I'm sorry for everything. Maybe one day we can talk." Reading her message, I felt a mix of emotions. There was a sense of justice in seeing the consequences of her actions, but also a hint of sadness for the strained family bond. As I turned off the lights and settled into bed, I felt a deep sense of contentment and peace. Sophie and I had faced our challenges with courage and emerged stronger. Our journey was a powerful testament to resilience, the importance of standing up for what's right, and the unbreakable bond between a mother and her daughter. With our story coming to a close, I'm curious to hear your thoughts. Do you think Hannah made the right decision in handling the situation with Linda? Was there a better way to address the favoritism and its impact on Sophie? Or was Hannah's approach justified given the circumstances? This situation touches on deep family dynamics and the choices we make to protect our loved ones. Please share your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed this story and the journey we've shared, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to the channel for more content. Your support means a lot and helps keep these stories coming. Thank you for watching and being a part of our story today.
That woman, she's always been a liar. Ha ha ha. Cancer, how exaggerated. She just wanted to skip work. These were the words spoken by my sister Miranda's husband, Martin, and her mother-in-law, Susan. Miranda is not someone who would lie. I can attest to that, having spent 25 years with her. I utterly despised the two who could say such things to Miranda, who is suffering from cancer and urgently needs treatment. It was unforgivable. I felt a strong need to save Miranda. I am Savannah, 25 years old, working in sales since graduating from college. I managed to join my first choice company, so my mind is always occupied with work. Savannah, did you do overtime again today? Don't overwork yourself and get sick. That's what my dad, who has been a company employee for many years, often says out of concern. Dad is kind, has a big heart, and generally doesn't sweat the small stuff. He rarely gets angry, but when he does, it's truly frightening. I remember pushing a friend during a fight in elementary school. The friend fell and got hurt. And it wasn't serious, but my parents were called to the school. I still remember how scary Dad was when he apologized to my friend's parents and later scolded me in the car. He didn't yell, but his angry face was unimaginable from his usually gentle demeanor. I had thought it was my friend's fault for the fight, but Dad must have realized my reluctant apology. After being scolded by Dad, I understood the severity of my actions and regretted them. Mom passed away from an illness before I entered elementary school. I don't have many memories of her. But Dad raised me with plenty of love while working. So I never felt lonely, even on his rest days. My sister Miranda, who is 5 years older, has always been the one I can talk to about anything. Despite the age difference, she has been like a friend and sometimes like a mom to me.
Savannah, you've got someone you like, right? How did you know? I'm thinking about confessing.
I could tell Miranda things I couldn't say to Dad. Miranda and I have never fought. I adore her. When she got engaged, it was to a tall, slender man with a refreshing smile, who looked great in a suit. He had visited our house a few times, and I had met him on those occasions, but
I'm Martin, and I'm dating Miranda.
Thank you for having me. He had visited our house a few times, and I had met him on those occasions, but he greeted me with a refreshing smile each time. She seemed so happy since she started dating Martin.
I've been proposed to.
Congratulations. I'm so happy for you. I cried when she told me about the proposal. I was a bit sad we wouldn't live together anymore, but overjoyed for her happiness. Dad felt the same. He cried when Miranda told him about her marriage. I'm sorry for the hardships I caused you since you were little. I'm happy you found happiness. Congratulations. Miranda and I were surprised to see Dad's tears, as we had never seen him cry before. When Mom passed away, Miranda was in elementary school. She used to go straight to the kitchen after school and learn to cook from Grandma, who occasionally visited. By middle school, she was making dinner as if it were the most natural thing. She never complained, even though I knew she missed out on playing with friends. Dad might have felt guilty about it. Later, Martin came to a family meeting. He brought sought-after sweets for me and a rare brandy for Dad. I thought he was perfect.
I promised to make Miranda happy and never make her cry. Thank you.
Martin greeted us politely. Dad also looked relieved. I felt confident that Miranda would be in good hands with him. I learned then that Martin was the heir to a prestigious hotel. After the greetings, they happily got married. Just before Miranda left home, I found out she was going to live with her in-laws.
Are you sure that's okay? Won't there be harassment like in dramas? As newlyweds, wouldn't it be better if you lived alone? Savannah, you worry too much. Their house is big enough for them to have their own space. Did Susan seem like the type to harass her daughter-in-law?
Indeed, I had met Martin's parents at the wedding, and both were very cheerful and friendly. They were greeting everyone at the venue. Please take good care of Martin. And even poured me a drink. I felt reassured thinking that if Miranda said it was okay, then it must be. Miranda was able to continue her job, though the commute became a bit more challenging. I felt a bit embarrassed for worrying too much. On the day we sent Miranda off, I felt happy but also lonely, and I found myself crying in bed. Half a year passed. I hadn't seen Miranda, but we exchanged messages occasionally. Her replies were slow, but she seemed to be doing well. I had a lot I wanted to talk to her about, but I refrained from disturbing her happiness. As for me, I was still immersed in my work. Living with Dad made me realize how much I appreciated Miranda. I thought I had been helping with household chores, but I found myself forgetting laundry in the washer or burning the food, realizing I wasn't as capable as I thought. Dad just laughed and didn't get angry. Then one day, when Dad was away on a business trip, I worked late and was eating delivery food at home. Suddenly, the doorbell rang. Wondering who it could be at this late hour, I cautiously went to the door, only to find Miranda standing there.
Miranda!
The Miranda I saw after a long time had lost a surprising amount of weight in just half a year. It was more accurate to say she looked emaciated rather than just thin. And her complexion was pale. As I rushed to her, she collapsed into my arms. I instinctively hugged her. I took the exhausted Miranda to my room and put her to bed. There were many questions I wanted to ask, but I thought it best to let her rest first. "Savannah, I'm sorry." Miranda kept apologizing.
It's okay, just rest for now. We'll talk after.
I rushed to the convenience store, bought her some drinks and fever-reducing sheets, and handed them to Miranda. "What happened?" When I asked Miranda, "I have cancer, but they won't let me go to the hospital," she replied in a hoarse voice, tears streaming down her face. It turned out, Miranda's happiness lasted only until they started living together. "Everyone changed the moment I became a daughter-in-law," Miranda said. She said that on the day of her marriage, she was asked to quit her job to help with the family business. She accepted this demand. After quitting her job, Miranda would wake up at 4 a.m. to thoroughly clean the entire house and prepare breakfast for the family and 10 relatives. Then, she would help at the hotel until the evening, followed by making dinner for everyone, doing the laundry, and completing the remaining household chores, not going to bed until late at night. She was only getting about 3 hours of sleep each night, which made my overtime seem trivial in comparison. Moreover, she had no days off. Every day, she faced bullying by Susan, who meticulously checked every household and work task. Martin, too, had changed drastically from his kind demeanor before marriage, becoming authoritarian. He didn't help Miranda against Susan's bullying, often siding with Susan and being harsh. Additionally, Miranda had a health checkup before quitting her job, where cancer was detected. Fortunately, it was found early, and she was told that immediate surgery could cure it. However, her family didn't believe her. She pleaded to be hospitalized for the surgery but was forced to work from dawn till late night instead. I was overwhelmed by the sheer amount of information. Just hearing it all made me tear up.
What? I don't understand. Why didn't you tell me?
When I asked Miranda, a shocking answer came back. Miranda revealed that Susan and Martin checked her mobile phone daily and monitored all her replies. She was told it was to ensure she wasn't slacking off in her household and work duties. That's why she couldn't ask for help. During our conversation, Miranda's bag kept vibrating with notifications.
Is that Martin?
Miranda nodded slightly.
I'll handle it. Miranda, you rest for today. We'll go to the hospital tomorrow.
I took Miranda's mobile phone to the living room. There were over 100 missed calls. When it rang again, I decided to answer.
Hey! Where did you run off to? Abandoning your duties, what a failure as a daughter-in-law.
Martin? This is Savannah. Hearing my voice, Martin's tone changed. Oh, Savannah. Long time no see. Can you pass the phone to Miranda?
Why would I do that? Where's that intensity gone? Miranda can't come to the phone right now. Martin, you know Miranda has cancer, right?
I wanted to yell at him, but I confronted him calmly instead. Ahahaha. Funny girl. You believe Miranda's lies. She doesn't have cancer. She just wanted to avoid housework.
What? On what basis are you saying she doesn't have cancer? Miranda arrived at my house completely exhausted and emaciated. I'm taking her to the hospital tomorrow. She won't be going back there.
She's there, right? I'll come to pick her up.
Don't come. If you do, I'll call the police.
I hung up the phone. It kept ringing, and I was scared they might come over. But fortunately, they didn't show up, and the calls were just continuous. I turned off Miranda's phone. I felt frustrated. I wondered why I hadn't noticed anything before the marriage. It pained me to see my beloved Miranda suffering. I couldn't sleep that night. The next day, I took Miranda to the hospital early in the morning. Her physical condition had deteriorated significantly, and the doctors advised immediate surgery, so she was admitted to the hospital. At the hospital, I requested that Miranda not be allowed to meet anyone who might visit, just to be safe. Then, I went home to bring the necessary things for her hospital stay. When I arrived, Dad had already returned.
Dad. Something terrible has happened.
I had been too upset to tell Dad anything yet.
What? What's wrong?
Dad looked startled by my urgency. As I explained about Miranda, his face gradually turned darker, and by the end, he was red with anger.
What? I can't believe this. First, we need to go to the hospital. Let's go.
It had been years since I'd seen Dad so angry. We both headed to the hospital where Miranda was waiting.
Miranda, are you okay?
Dad, I'm sorry. Don't talk anymore. Just tell me what you want to do from now on. I'll take care of it. I want a divorce. Understood. I silently listened to the exchange between Miranda and Dad. As Dad was about to leave the room, I started to follow Wen. I determined to help her.
Savannah! Wait! Take this!
Miranda handed me an envelope.
What's this?
Before I could check,
Savannah! Let's go!
Called Dad. I put the envelope in my bag and left the room. Dad and I then headed to Martin's house. Upon arriving, Susan came out. Finally, you've brought her back. Oh? She's not here? She spoke as if nothing was wrong. I couldn't stand it, and
Miranda has been hospitalized because of you.
I told them firmly.
Oh my.
That sounds terrible.
But it must be a sham, right? That girl is a habitual liar.
Susan replied without a hint of remorse.
What? A sham? Well, let's discuss this inside,
Dad said, and we entered the house. It seemed Susan was the only one there. Miranda's Fael must be at work. I remembered Miranda saying he was a workaholic and indifferent to anything but work. He had turned a blind eye to the mistreatment Miranda suffered. Then Martin came from the back.
Oh, long time no see.
He greeted us with the same refreshing smile as when we first met. Now I understood that these two were only good on the surface.
Miranda has cancer. It's not a sham or anything of the sort.
Ahahaha. Harold, you're exaggerating. It can't be cancer. I was astounded by Martin's laughing response.
Then look at this.
Dad showed them the medical report from the hospital. Susan and Martin looked shocked but quickly.
Oh my! It was true! We never believed her because she's always lying. Regular behavior is important, isn't it?
Susan said.
Miranda doesn't lie. What do you think she is?
I couldn't help but interject. A daughter-in-law. Nothing more, nothing less. You wouldn't understand, being single. A daughter-in-law is supposed to live for the family. Susan started spouting nonsense.
What? Live for the family by not letting her go to the hospital despite her illness, making her work from dawn to midnight? She said everyone changed after coming to this house.
Ah, she's lying about that too. She's good at lying, isn't she? Maybe it's because she's from a single-parent family? Being a daughter-in-law isn't being a guest. It's normal to be strict. No matter what I said, Susan kept laughing and responding. I felt like crying, but I clenched my teeth and held back, knowing I couldn't let myself cry. Then Dad spoke up.
The illness wasn't a lie, was it? Do you have any proof of her other supposed lies? Well, it doesn't matter anymore. It's clear from this conversation that you're unreasonable. We cannot leave Miranda in this house. We will proceed with the divorce through a lawyer, as Miranda wishes,
he said. He seemed calm, but I could tell he was trembling with anger.
Harold, please wait. Let me see Miranda. I'm sorry for not believing her illness, but as Mom said, Miranda often lies. And the claim that Mom was harsh and made her work from dawn to midnight is false. I think we can sort it out if we talk. Please let me see Miranda.
Martin pleaded with Dad, apologizing deeply. I was appalled that he still called Miranda a liar. And then listen to this. I played a voice recording. It documented Miranda's day from early morning to late night. 4:30 a.m., starting to clean. Miranda's voice was recorded.
This cleaning is inadequate. Look at this dust. A dusty woman like you wouldn't notice, right? Want to be thrown out?
Susan's voice was on the recording. In another part, I have cancer. Please let me go to the hospital. Miranda pleaded, to which Martin responded,
Shut up. If you have time to say that, work. Maybe working hard will cure it.
It was unbelievable. Susan and Martin were speechless, seemingly unaware they had been recorded.
Now, who is the liar? We'll be leaving. If you try to approach Miranda again, I will not forgive you,
Dad said, and we left the house, heading back to the hospital. When we told Miranda about the discussion, "Thank you so much. I'm so grateful for Dad and Savannah," she cried. "It was because of your recording, Miranda," I told her. When we left the room, the envelope Miranda handed me contained the voice recorder. On the day Miranda fled to our home, she had hidden the recorder in her clothing. Miranda must have known that her in-laws would pretend not to know anything. She realized she needed evidence. Her previous job at a publishing house had given her access to a voice recorder. Knowing Susan and Martin, it was risky. There was no telling what they would do if they found out. It must have required a great deal of courage. It must have taken a lot of courage for Miranda to record everything in secret. Later, Dad found a strong divorce lawyer, and the divorce was successfully finalized. I followed Miranda's example and recorded our conversation with Susan and Martin on my mobile phone. The fact that Miranda had cancer and they denied her medical care, coupled with the two recordings, enabled us to secure a substantial settlement in the divorce trial. The lawyer told us that the hotel run by Martin's family was in dire financial straits. They couldn't afford the settlement and asked to pay in installments. But the lawyer rejected the request without even consulting us. With the lump sum payment, it seemed only a matter of time before the hotel would close. Curious, I checked the hotel's reviews and found them to be quite low. It made sense to me. People like that couldn't possibly offer warm hospitality. A friend living near the hotel told me that neighbors had overheard our conversation with Susan on the day Dad and I visited. In a small town, rumors spread quickly, and it seems they were now viewed coldly by the community. Miranda's surgery was a success, and she was discharged from the hospital after about a month and a half. Looking a bit healthier than the day she had fled to our house. She decided to spend some time recovering at home, continuing outpatient treatments. I was happy that the three of us were living together again.
I'm thinking of making Dad's favorite steak today. Oh, I'm looking forward to it.
I can leave work early today, so I'll buy the ingredients on my way home. Miranda's cooking was incomparably delicious compared to mine. I couldn't be happier with our days filled with laughter as a family of three. The day of my beloved niece's wedding, like she was my own child. Actually, the choir we booked for today won't make it in time due to an accident. Please. I understand your situation, but I'm begging you, sing for my daughter's sake. The venue manager, Mr. Brown, and my sister Linda pleaded with me. I, a former opera singer, had decided 20 years ago never to involve myself with opera again. Yet, if I don't sing now, my precious niece's wedding will end imperfectly. I'll sing with all my heart. After making that resolution, my life took a dramatic turn. My name is Nancy. It's been 25 years since I married my husband, Paul. Nancy, it's our 25th anniversary this year. How about we take a trip somewhere?
I'm surprised at you suggesting that, Paul. I thought I was the only one excited about celebrating our anniversaries every year.
That's not true at all. I'm just a poker face. We're celebrating 25 years of marriage. Perhaps it's because we never had children. But that never happened. Meanwhile, my sister Linda, who married around the same time as me, has a daughter, Betty. That's why I used to struggle with the lively interactions of Linda's family when we all gathered. It felt like the happiness of a family with children was being flaunted in front of me. But those feelings belong to a distant past. Delighted by the travel proposal from my husband, I immediately called Linda the next day. Did you guys do anything for your 25th anniversary?
Yes, the three of us went on a trip. It was fun.
A trip, nice. By the way, speaking of which, Betty is getting married.
Really? Congratulations!
I was thrilled by the surprise news from Linda, my voice brimming with excitement. The greetings between our families were already over, and it seems the wedding is set for November, 3 months from now. Linda asked us to attend Betty's wedding as a couple, and I happily agreed. I was genuinely delighted about Betty's wedding, whom I cherished like my own child. Betty will be so happy. And Nancy, there's one more favor I want to ask of you. But the next moment, my face clouded over upon hearing Linda's words. Betty is looking for someone to sing a hymn at her wedding. Nancy, won't you sing? The venue can arrange a choir for the wedding, can't they? Trying not to let my irritation show, I kept my voice as calm as possible. I want you to sing. I kind of understood what Linda was getting at. But this request is something I can't accept. Wanting to end the call quickly, I let my emotions take over and raised my voice.
I can't do it. I decided not to sing ever again after that day. I'm glad to attend the wedding, but I won't sing.
With that, I hung up the phone, ignoring Linda, who seemed about to say something else. My heart was pounding loudly. The image that came to mind was of myself, crying in a hospital room. The truth is, I used to be an opera singer until 20 years ago. I loved singing since I was little. My family always praised me when I sang loudly. That joy made me sing anytime, anywhere. Especially, a famous hymn I often hummed. I didn't understand the lyrics at all, but I somehow liked it and eventually became interested in opera. Encouraged by my parents to master what I loved, I studied vocal music in college and then worked hard at an opera training center to become an opera singer. I thought I was invincible, being able to make a career out of what I loved. I didn't even notice my body was screaming out in distress. By the time I realized, the seed of happiness inside me had shattered. I cried my heart out. It was then I decided never to sing opera again. Remembering the painful past made my head ache. I glanced at a photo on the windowsill. It was taken last year on our anniversary with my husband. Everything's fine, I'm happy now. I reassured myself while taking deep breaths. I managed to calm myself down. I interacted with Linda as if nothing had happened, and finally, the day of Betty's wedding arrived. The sky was high, the air crisp, and the chirping of birds echoed. Next to the family waiting room was the bridal room, and seeing Betty in her beautiful bridal dress, I couldn't hold back my tears. It's overwhelming, the feeling of a daughter getting married. The groom had kindness oozing from his face, a wonderful man. Betty, smiling beside her groom, looked the most beautiful I'd ever seen. Into this blissful atmosphere, a venue staff member rushed over with a grim face. Worried about what had happened, I peeked into the bridal room and saw the manager, Mr. Brown, repeatedly apologizing alongside the staff. The faces of the bride and groom clouded over as they listened to Mr. Brown. Betty, trying not to ruin her beautifully made-up face, was holding back tears, but drop by drop, tears streamed down her cheeks. As I watched with concern, the manager Mr. Brown and Linda approached me.
Actually, the choir we booked for today won't make it in time due to an accident.
Hey Nancy, please. I fully understand your circumstances, but for Betty's sake, won't you sing? The manager, Mr. Brown, and Linda pleaded with me. Memories of the past resurfaced.
I'm sorry, but the baby inside you has already passed away.
The harsh reality hit me as I lay in the hospital bed. A year into my marriage, still in the early stages of my opera career, I took on even the smallest jobs to build my career. In addition to that, I never missed a day of practice. I had no days off, and my days were so busy that I hardly had enough time for sleep or meals. I thought I could push myself further since I was doing what I loved. That's what I thought. Then, I discovered I was pregnant. When I found out about the pregnancy, I was genuinely happy. But at the same time, I became desperate to increase my fame while I still could, pushing myself harder than ever before. However, during a rehearsal for a concert, I experienced a pain in my abdomen like nothing I'd ever felt before. I collapsed and was rushed to the hospital, where the doctor informed me that I had miscarried. I'm so sorry, my baby. It's all my stupid fault. Nancy, calm down. It's not your fault. My husband said, holding me tightly, but his warmth only made the pain and guilt worse. I was tormented by self-blame and spent many days mentally and physically unstable. To add to the misfortune, subsequent tests revealed that my ovaries were afflicted with cancer. It was in the early stages, with no symptoms yet, so there was a high chance of a complete cure through an oophorectomy. So, I underwent the surgery immediately, and it was a success. There was no metastasis. But I was left unable to ever conceive again. All that remained was a sense of emptiness. The baby had died because I was too obsessed with opera. And then, as if it were divine punishment, I was rendered infertile. At that time, I was emotionally unstable, crying every night, and I cried so much that I developed inflammation in my throat and lost my voice. I can't possibly sing opera like this. My husband just silently stayed by my side as I tried to smile through the sadness. Even after my throat healed, I never felt like singing opera again. I decided that I should no longer involve myself with opera. With that, I discarded everything related to opera. At that time, I was trying to atone for the baby that couldn't come into this world by eliminating opera from my life. This is the hymn that was scheduled to be sung today. Brought back to reality, I looked at the score that the manager, Mr. Brown, had handed to me, and it was the name of the hymn I used to sing. This song. Unconsciously, my hand went to my stomach. It was a song full of memories for me, one that my mother used to hum when I was little. And it was the song I, who was supposed to become a mother, gently sang to my unborn baby while stroking my belly every day. Nancy, I think everyone is waiting for your song, my husband said, nodding gently. Should I really sing it? Linda gently held my hand. I want you to sing, Nancy. I grew up listening to your voice. What are you saying? We laughed together. Linda's words suddenly lightened my heart. The choir not being able to come today must have been fate. This chance given by God. I'll give it my all. There's only 1 hour left until the ceremony starts, but can you sing? Yes, I'll sing with all my heart. I immediately started vocal warm-ups in a separate room that was hastily prepared. It had been 20 years since I'd sung with such earnestness. Nancy, you haven't changed. I love your voice, Linda said. Tearing up, Linda said this, and in response, I playfully flashed a peace sign. Then, the wedding ceremony began. In the solemn atmosphere, accompanied by the sound of the pipe organ, the bride and groom made their entrance. Linda, and her husband too, couldn't hold back their emotions, and tears flowed freely. I wondered if I had become a mother, would I have felt the same? I gently closed my eyes. Mom, let's sing together. My child, humming a hymn, said this. Where did you learn that? Surprised, I asked, and my child replied. You always sang it, didn't you, Mom? I could hear your voice even when I was in your belly. I love your voice, Mom. I love Mom's singing too. Could such a future have been mine? Suddenly, I felt a tear roll down my cheek. My husband gently held my hand. You might be nervous, but it'll be okay, Nancy. I love your singing. Encouraged by my husband, I smiled, nodded, and stood beside the pipe organ. I hoped everyone present, the bride and groom, and all the guests, would find happiness. I sang with all my soul. It's strange to say it myself, but after 20 years, my voice was clear and strong, and I believe the feelings in the lyrics, and my emotions, reached everyone. Linda, her husband, and even my parents cried listening to my song. It was then I realized, everyone had been quietly waiting for my song. I felt incredibly fortunate for the people around me. I was truly glad I sang today. And when the applause enveloped me after I finished singing, I felt refreshed, finally liberated from the past. Nancy, that was truly wonderful. I got goosebumps. I've never heard Nancy's singing before. If I have a baby, I want to play Nancy's songs every day. As the wedding ended and we returned to the family room, Linda and the others rushed over. I was simply happy that everyone was pleased. It had been a long time since I'd felt this way. My husband stood by my side, supporting my shoulder, so I leaned on him gently. His warmth amplified the sense of accomplishment for having delivered my song to everyone, not the guilt I felt when I miscarried. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to sing in front of people, really. I was able to say goodbye to my painful past today. Hearing my words, my husband seemed on the verge of tears again. Why are you crying, Paul? Nancy, let's continue to overcome everything together as a couple. Always. I felt his grip tighten. Being said this in front of the day's stars, the bride and groom, felt somewhat embarrassing, and I playfully flashed a peace sign to hide my embarrassment. We want to be a couple like you, Nancy, even after decades. You'll have to share your secrets with us sometime. As we chatted warmly, the manager Mr. Brown approached. Thank you so much, Nancy. Oh no, I'm glad I could help in some way. Can I ask you something? Did you sing at a wedding venue about 20 years ago? Yeah, I did a bit of part-time work when I was in college. I had worked at a wedding venue during my college days. Back then, the manager who discovered I specialized in opera took a liking to my singing and let me perform at several weddings. When Mr. Brown mentioned the name of the wedding venue where I had my part-time job, I was taken aback. It turns out my parents had their wedding there. Mr. Brown began with a nostalgic tone in his voice. He went on to say that both of his parents were remarrying. Mr. Brown was brought by his father and his sister by their mother. They married when he was in the 1st grade, and their ceremony was at the wedding venue where I worked part-time. Back then, even though he actually liked his mother and sister, he was too embarrassed to show kindness easily. He was also embarrassed about the wedding and had been stubbornly reluctant to attend until the last minute. But when I heard you singing the hymn at the venue, I somehow managed to open up. From that day on, I truly became part of a real family with my mom and sister. And your singing today was just like it was back then. Mr. Brown looked at me with shining eyes. I had no idea my singing had reached someone in such a way. Thank you so much. I can't tell you how happy it makes me that my singing has lived on in your heart. Thank you. I realized my singing had reached people, even without my frantic efforts to gain recognition. After today, I felt ready to face life head-on. 2 weeks after the wedding, I got a call from Mr. Brown. Hello, it's been a while. I have a favor to ask of you. He wanted to hire me as a choir for a wedding. Apparently, someone had posted my singing on social media, and there were multiple inquiries for me to sing. If there are people who want me to sing, then I definitely want to do it. I immediately agreed. The power of social media is incredible. Even the company that used to employ me as an opera singer reached out. So, the company I used to work for asked if I wanted to try opera again. I discussed it with my husband.
That's fantastic. What do you want to do, Nancy?
I want to stand on stage again as an opera singer. My husband smiled and nodded repeatedly. I support you, Nancy. Just remember not to overdo it. Understood. Thanks, Paul. With my husband's encouragement, I started practicing again, dreaming of returning to the stage. 5 months later, my voice filled the theater. The audience's gaze was fixed on me, and I delivered a soulful song to their hearts. Over these 5 months, I did everything I could, from physical conditioning to vocal practice, to bring myself into the best shape possible. Looking at the audience, I saw people moved to tears by my singing. This was the scene I had always wanted to see. During the curtain call, I was so overwhelmed that I almost cried myself. The endless applause enveloped me, and I felt a happiness unlike any before. Glancing at the front row, I saw my husband, watching over me with a gentle gaze. The husband who silently stood by me during tough times. The husband who quietly watched over me until I recovered. And the husband who loved my singing and encouraged me to pursue it. Paul, thank you so much. My life, now shining brightly again, please continue to walk this path with me. I couldn't wait to share these feelings with my husband. Seeing my granddaughter Mary not touching her hamburger, the server approached us with a stern tone. You need to eat what you've ordered, or it'll be a problem. Would you normally say that to a customer? Arguing seemed futile, so I responded humbly. I'm sorry. I think she's just waiting for mine to arrive. After my apologetic reply, the server walked away, looking dissatisfied. What a rude attitude. Trying to lighten the mood, I turned to Mary.
Let's eat, shall we?
But Mary remained downcast.
What's wrong?
Something seemed off. Then, the same server came back to our table, carrying something. Here's the toy that comes with the kids' meal. She slammed the toy onto the table. Looking up at the server, I saw her smirking at Mary. It was a chilling sight. Mary must have felt something was wrong too.
I don't want this.
She threw the toy on the table to the floor. She's never usually so rough. Now. We shouldn't throw things. As I tried to calm Mary and pick up the toy she had thrown. Suddenly,
Grandma, let's get out of here.
Mary grabbed my arm as I was reaching for the toy and shouted. Looking at the discarded toy, I noticed a piece of paper with something written on it.
Grandma! No!
Ignoring Mary's plea, I looked at the folded paper and felt a chill. It was a Saturday. I was on my way to my son Jim's house. It was a warm day, hinting that spring was near. Then, Mom, thanks for today as well. As soon as I arrived, Jim and his wife Kate left the house together for their once or twice a month Saturday work.
Grandma, what's for lunch today?
After seeing her parents off, Mary came to me with a lovely smile. How about we go out to eat today? Mary was delighted with my suggestion. My name is Ellie. I am 63 years old this year. When my son and his wife are busy, I come to look after Mary like this. Having lost my husband early and spent a lot of time alone, the time spent with my granddaughter was nothing short of happiness for me. My son Jim has always tried hard not to be a burden on me. Even though there's no need for him to worry about me, he's been working ever since he graduated from high school. Thinking back, his first job was terrible. It was then I truly understood what a black company was, even as a parent. He would leave for work early in the morning and return home around the time the date changed. You could visibly see him getting thinner, even though he was quite well built, as he continued with that lifestyle. Seeing my son Jim become increasingly distressed, I somehow managed to convince him, and finally, he decided to quit that job. It had been 3 years since he started working there. Though there seemed to be some issues with the company upon leaving, I felt relieved once he was free from that place. I'm going to be unemployed for a while. Jim said this with a look of regret, but seeing my child physically and mentally deteriorating was much harder for me. When I told him that, I'll take my time to think and decide on the next place, he smiled, seemingly reassured. Being a hard worker, he continued his job search while studying for a qualification in a field he was interested in, and finally, he found a new job. I was worried because of the first experience, but the new workplace turned out to be surprisingly clean. He would come home on time, and there was no unpaid overtime. Jim seemed to have some peace of mind and was lively and enthusiastic about going to work every day. When he started to be recognized for his abilities and got on a career track, "There's something important I want to talk about," he said suddenly with a serious look. "I'm sensitive to these things." He must want to introduce a girlfriend. "Something important?" I feigned ignorance and asked. "There's someone I want you to meet, Mom." My intuition was right. Jim had dated a few women before. I wasn't explicitly told, but you can somehow tell. But this was the first time he wanted to introduce someone to me. "So, that means?" "I'm free whenever, so let me know when you've decided on a day to bring her over," I said casually, feeling a mix of happiness and sadness. Later, the woman Jim brought over was polite and greeted properly. I've always taught Jim to greet properly since he was young. So, the first impression was perfect. I didn't intend to judge, but I couldn't help noticing her appearance and behavior. "Nice to meet you, I'm Kate." She seemed nervous, her small frame tense. "Nice to meet you too, I'm Jim's mom." Wondering if I'd been staring too much, I greeted her brightly to ease the tension. "Jim, why don't you two sit in the living room and wait?" While they waited in the living room, I prepared some coffee. Before bringing it over, they were whispering to each other but quieted down when they saw me. As I served the coffee, I heard them say thank you. But then, there was silence for a while. How do mothers around the world liven up moments like these? It's my first time, and I'm just puzzled. Huh? But it's everyone's first time in these situations, isn't it? Realizing something so obvious made me laugh unexpectedly. Jim and Kate looked at me, puzzled. "I'm sorry. It's just that it's the first time Jim's brought a girlfriend over, so I'm a bit nervous." I decided to just be myself from now on. After all, we're going to be a family for a long time.
I'm nervous too. But today, we have something we want to tell you, Mom.
Here it comes. This is the moment to listen seriously.
Mom, we're thinking of getting married.
I thought so. We've already got the okay from Kate's parents, but... Jim stops mid-sentence, looking surprised. Next to him, Kate also seems flustered. What are they both so flustered about? Mom. They peek at my face, worried. Wondering what was happening, I felt something cold spill onto my hand on my lap. It took me a moment to realize, but it seems tears were falling from my eyes.
I'm so sorry. Did I do something wrong?
It's the first meeting, and here the mother of the person they want to marry is suddenly crying. Kate's panicked reaction is now a funny story, but at that moment, she must have been really anxious.
Oh, why is this happening? I'm not even sure myself.
Saying that, I laughed through my tears. I had no intention of opposing Jim's marriage. In fact, I was happy that he had finally found someone to be happy with other than me. These tears must be of happiness. But I couldn't deny feeling like a part of my heart was being taken away. After excusing myself for a moment and coming back, they still looked worried. With a deliberately cheerful voice, I said, "Kate, I trust Jim. If he chose you, I know everything will be okay no matter what." Kate seemed to be waiting for what I would say next.
Promise me, both of you, to build a happy family together.
I could see Kate's expression brighten.
Thank you, Mom. All right, no more serious talk.
With that, I started asking about how they got to know each other and their journey to deciding on marriage. While Jim was seeing Kate out, I muttered to my husband's portrait. Jim is getting married. Time flies, doesn't it? It felt as if the portrait of my husband smiled back. Kate works at the same place as Jim, and she plans to continue working even after getting married. Jim wanted to live together, but I declined. I didn't want to intrude on the young couple, and I was looking forward to having time to myself. Neither wanting to be a burden nor to burden them. They decided on a new home within cycling distance from our house, and Jim moved out. Time flew by, and soon my granddaughter Mary was born. I was amazed at how adorable a creature a grandchild could be. As Kate's maternity leave was coming to an end, I checked with Jim. "Have you decided who will look after Mary?" I was hoping for a chance to take care of Mary. Not out of kindness or obligation, but because I wanted to be with her. However, Jim thought I was worried and gave me a disappointing reply.
Mom, don't worry. Our company has a daycare.
Jim's new job really seemed to be a respectable white-collar company. I guess I won't be taking care of her. A few days later, Kate, who had been observing our conversation, brought me hope. "Ellie, are you free this Saturday?" She asked over the phone, and since I had no particular plans, I inquired about the matter. "Actually, both Jim and I have sudden work on Saturday. And the daycare is closed on Saturdays." I immediately responded. "Mary? You mean if I could take care of Mary?" I was leaning forward even though I was on the phone. "Could you?" I almost answered too eagerly, but kept my composure.
"Yes, that's fine."
My voice must have trembled with excitement. Kate sounded happy on the other end of the phone. Since then, I occasionally take care of Mary, which has continued to this day. As it approached noon, I took Mary out. As promised, we walked to the nearby family restaurant. I would prefer to eat at home, but after receiving suspicious calls and an unexpected pizza delivery while taking care of Mary at Jim's house, I felt uneasy. The family restaurant we were heading to was where I had worked part-time before, familiar and convenient for us. Upon arrival, the staff guided us to the usual spacious sofa seat. It was Saturday lunchtime, but it wasn't too crowded. "Mary, what would you like to eat today?" I handed her the menu while sitting next to her.
"I want the kids' menu."
Mary opened the menu to the kids' menu page.
"I'll have this."
She pointed to her usual choice, a hamburger. Mary really loves hamburgers, doesn't she? Seeing Mary's smiling face, I chose my own meal. Although spring was near, the days were still a bit chilly. I decided on the seasonal pot au feu. After placing our order via the touch panel, we went to the drink bar. Mary chose orange juice, and I filled a cup with coffee, then we returned to our seats. Did Grandma know I like hamburgers?
Of course.
It was a casual conversation, but my face was smiling the whole time. Right, Mary. Go to the bathroom before we eat. Mary often wants to go to the bathroom during meals, so I encouraged her to go ahead.
Okay.
With a lively response, Mary headed to the bathroom. Her steps seemed lighter, perhaps excited for the hamburger. Her retreating figure was endearing to me. When Mary returned, the hamburger was served. But she didn't start eating. Maybe she was waiting for my meal to arrive. "Mary, you can start eating." I encouraged, but Mary looked at me puzzled. That's when the server brought my pot au feu. Noticing Mary hadn't touched her burger, the server spoke in a stern tone. "You need to eat what you've ordered." Would you normally say that to a customer? Surprised, I thought about the food waste issue and wondered if staff were instructed to say this. Arguing seemed pointless, so I responded humbly. "I'm sorry. She's just waiting for mine. We'll make sure it's eaten." The server left with a look of dissatisfaction. She was strikingly beautiful but had such a poor attitude. Shaking off my astonishment, I encouraged Mary.
"Let's eat."
However, Mary remained downcast and didn't touch her hamburger. "What's wrong, Mary?" Something seemed off. Then the same server approached with something in hand. "Here's the toy that comes with the kids' meal," she said bluntly, placing the toy on the table. Something was wrong. I boldly looked at the server, who was smirking at Mary. It wasn't a kind smile, but something creepy, as if plotting. Feeling a chill, Mary must have sensed something too.
"I don't want this."
She threw the toy on the floor. Something she'd never normally do. Under different circumstances, I would scold her, but this was different. Aware of other customers, I tried to calm her. Now. We shouldn't throw things." As I tried to calm Mary and pick up the toy she had thrown. Suddenly,
"Grandma, let's get out of here."
Mary grabbed my arm as I was reaching for the toy and shouted, "What are you talking about?" I noticed something had come out of the discarded toy. Like a piece of paper.
"Grandma, no."
Ignoring Mary's plea, I looked at the folded paper and was horrified. It was covered in what looked like a spell. "What is this?" I remembered the suspicious calls at Jim's house, with a voice chanting a spell as soon as I answered. Could there be a connection? Noticing something was wrong, the manager came out from the back. "Is there something wrong?" he asked, offering a hand as I crouched. He seemed to notice the paper in my hand.
"What is this?"
The manager looked disgusted. Standing up, I explained the situation. The unpleasant server just glared at Mary, silent.
"I'm very sorry."
The manager apologized, but the woman wouldn't take her eyes off Mary. I feared for Mary's safety and hugged her close, addressing the woman. "Even though the manager has apologized, don't you have anything to say?" I had tried not to upset her, but it seems I reached my limit too. My tone became a bit harsh. Perhaps triggered by my tone, the woman suddenly shouted,
"If it weren't for this brat."
She lunged at Mary. Instinctively, I shielded Mary, and the woman scratched me, yelling,
"Move! Let go!"
The manager tried to stop her, but he couldn't restrain her alone. Hearing the commotion, several male staff members subdued her, and someone had called the police. Mary started crying out of fear. "I'm sorry, Mary," I said, holding my scratched area and comforting her trembling body. Before the situation escalated further, Mary and I were taken to the restaurant's office. The woman was there too. "Emma, why did you do that?" The manager asked her, but she remained silent. "I'm really sorry." The store manager apologized to us again. As I was pondering over the situation, the police arrived. "Emma, 33 years old." I overheard her name during the separate questioning. I told the police about Emma's aggressive behavior towards Mary for not eating her hamburger and about the suspicious paper in the toy. Then, Mary, who had been listening, "Grandma, it's not that." She tugged at my sleeve. "What's wrong?" I asked, but she seemed hesitant. "Mary, can you tell me that story?" A young police officer gently encouraged her. "I saw it. When I was going to the bathroom, that woman put shrimp in the hamburger." Mary hesitantly testified. It was a fact I hadn't known. "So that's why you didn't eat it?" It sounded like Emma clicked her tongue. The young officer seemed to realize. This child has a shellfish allergy. He finally understood and asked the manager to check if the hamburger was still available. "Too bad, it must have been disposed of by now." Emma spoke up for the first time after the two had left the office, crossing her arms and legs with a disdainful look. "Could you answer our questions as well?" The officer sighed in disbelief at her questioning.
"That's what I've been saying. I have nothing to tell. I'll keep silent."
Emma fell silent again, idly playing with her loosely permed hair, looking bored. Her demeanor changed drastically when the manager and the young police officer returned to the office. In the officer's hand was a plate with a cold hamburger. Emma looked as if she couldn't believe what she was seeing. Under the police officer's supervision, the manager cut the hamburger open. Inside wasn't just shrimp, but also crab meat used in crab cream croquettes.
"Does this restaurant's hamburgers normally contain shrimp and crab meat?"
The officer asked. Probably for confirmation. "No, they do not." The manager seemed disappointed. Then, everyone in the room turned their gaze towards Emma. She kept her head down and didn't move, but then she started to shake her shoulders. "Emma." When the manager spoke to her, a small voice leaked out. I thought she might be crying. But it turned out she was trying to suppress laughter. Lifting her face, she finally couldn't hold back and burst out laughing loudly.
"I got caught."
Her voice was buoyant, like someone caught in a mischievous act, clearly enjoying herself.
"I'll tell you everything. But I want that handsome guy over there, not you."
She pointed at the young police officer after hearing our conversation.
"Behave yourself."
The officer who had been questioning Emma scolded her.
"Oh, don't look so scary."
Emma winked, but it seemed ineffective on the experienced officer. What a woman. I could only stare in disbelief at the scene. The details Emma bragged about were beyond normal comprehension for me. She claimed to be Jim's ex-girlfriend, a co-worker from his previous black company. Jim was treated as incompetent there, so Emma had broken up with him. However, upon hearing rumors of Jim's success at his new job, she attempted to reconnect. But Jim. Emma showed no remorse for her actions.
"I even graciously offered to get back together, and he rejected me,"
she complained. Understandably so. Jim was already married to Kate, and they had Mary. I thought if I could just deal with a child, he'd choose me over that plain woman. She spoke as if expecting understanding, but surely no one empathized. Emma had been monitoring Jim and Mary, engaging in harassment whenever she disapproved of something. The delivery orders I didn't recognize and the suspicious calls were her doing. When I started bringing Mary to this family restaurant, Emma also started working here, learning Mary's preferences and allergies. I was horrified. I even regretted inadvertently revealing Mary's allergy myself. I embraced Mary as she leaned against me. I thought I finally had my chance today. After confessing everything, Emma sighed with disappointment. When her story ended, the police officer took her away from the office. As she left, she glared at Mary and laughed creepily, which made me tighten my embrace. After apologizing to the restaurant staff for the inconvenience and thanking the person who saved the hamburger from being disposed of, Mary and I went back to Jim's house. We waited for Kate and Jim to come home and then told them about the day's events.
That woman, she did what?
Jim clenched his fist, trembling with anger, but Kate gently enveloped his hand.
I had heard about her, but what a terrible woman.
Kate knew of her from Jim's stories. If only I had rejected her more firmly. No, it's not your fault. I should have been more careful, too. Leaving everything to Ellie and even making her scared. Both Jim and Kate blamed themselves. I felt the same. Had I adequately protected Mary while she was in my care? In the heavy silence, Kate finally spoke. At least Mary is safe. That's all that matters. To ensure such an incident wouldn't repeat, we discussed and decided that Jim's family would move. Emma was sentenced to a severe prison term for attempting to harm a child. Unsatisfied with the verdict, she became frenzied and violent in court, looking possessed. Watching her from the gallery, Kate and I decided to remodel our home to protect Mary from that demon again. Emma continued to chant spells in prison, deemed insane, and was eventually transferred to a psychiatric ward. I was certain she wouldn't leave there. Watching her frenzied state confirmed my belief. But still, we needed reassurance. Jim's family moved into a home equipped with security cameras, alarms, and immediate security response. Kate switched to part-time work for more flexibility and spent more time with Mary. We were determined never to let Mary be scared again. We likely still share that sentiment. Grandma, why do you look scared? 5 years later. Mary, soon to be a 5th grader, peered into my face. Oh? Did I look scared? I diverted the topic.
Let's get ready. Aren't we going out to eat?
And also called out to Kate and Mary's sister, Lucy. It was Saturday. Basking in the warm spring sunshine, we started walking. Mary held Lucy's hand as they walked ahead, while Kate and I followed, watching their backs.
Kids are really at a disadvantage when their parents have low-paying jobs, aren't they?
Sandra, a mother of one of my son's teammates, always seemed to harbor an intense hostility towards me. To be honest, I never really liked her. One day, I was invited by her for lunch. Sensing something unpleasant, I decided to take the initiative. Do you know about my father? Days later, I showed up at the lunch hosted by Sandra in a luxury car, and her attitude completely changed. I'm Ashley, a 32-year-old office worker. I met my husband George through work. We hit it off and started dating. We're a close-knit family of 3, blessed with our son. He is Noah, 5 years old now. As he grew, he joined a local baseball team, and I found myself constantly busy with work and social commitments. To be honest, I've never been keen on mingling with the other moms from the team, but supporting my son's baseball games naturally led to more interactions. Among these new acquaintances was Sandra. Her child and Noah were good friends, so I tried to get along with her. But Sandra was a bit of a handful. She always dressed in high-end brands, and all she talked about was how elite her husband was. Because of that, she was somewhat ostracized by others. Still, being on the same team meant I couldn't just ignore her. Plus, our sons were friends, so I tried to accept her like everyone else did. One day, as usual, I was at a tea party hosted by Sandra. Calling it a tea party might be a stretch since it was really just a session to listen to her boast. It was never enjoyable. Sandra was usually the one doing all the talking, but that day she was strangely cheerful and even seemed interested in what others had to say. The friends around us were engaging in lively conversations, but I was suspicious. Wondering what was going on, Sandra suddenly gave me a sly smile and turned the conversation to me.
By the way, your husband is George, right? My husband said he saw him at a subsidiary the other day. Is that true?
As I looked puzzled by her question, her smile deepened, and she looked at me as if she was sizing me up.
I can't believe your husband works at a subsidiary.
Is there a problem? My husband works hard and is up for promotion. I countered.
You know, you're always at our tea parties, right? I thought maybe it was taking a toll on your finances. Subsidiary jobs don't pay that well, I guess.
She looked at me with pity, and I couldn't help but feel annoyed. I confidently responded that I worked too and were not struggling. But she just laughed at my reply.
Both spouses working is a sign of poverty, you know. It's sad, having to work because your husband doesn't earn enough.
Her attitude was clearly mocking. I tried to explain that I work because I enjoy it, but she seemed to take it as me being defensive. She continued to insinuate that working couples are poor and that I must struggle to afford luxury brands. As I observed her, it dawned on me why she was in such a good mood. She had probably found something to ridicule me about today. I was genuinely upset. Whatever I said to her was dismissed as bravado, leaving me no room for a comeback. I couldn't understand why she suddenly treated me like an enemy. That day ended unresolved. Later, I was heading to the park with Noah. He was excited about possibly being chosen as the baseball team's ace for the next game. We were about to go to our usual practice spot when we ran into Sandra. Her son was usually a regular in the team, and I assumed it was the same that time. But she seemed downcast today. Curiously, I greeted her and asked, "Is something wrong with your son, Sandra?" Her response was sharp, pointing at my child.
Your kid took my son's position. All his hard work for nothing, beaten by a poor kid.
Seeing her hold her son, I realized why she treated me like an enemy at the tea party. Noah had taken the ace position her son had, and she resented me for it. Needless to say, Noah had also worked hard, and team positions are the coach's decision, not ours. However, she probably couldn't accept it with her high pride.
Hand that regular spot over to my son right now. I have all the money you could want. How much do you need?
Her words infuriated me. It was only natural, considering she was trying to buy Noah's hard-earned regular spot with money. Annoyed, I shot back at her. We don't need your money. My son earned his regular spot through his own efforts. Besides, even your son wouldn't want a spot that was bought with money. Her son looked down and nodded slightly at my words. Seeing that, I glared at her with frustration. Clearly, she didn't appreciate my attitude.
Impudent woman. You think you've won just because you're poor?
With those words, she roughly grabbed her son's hand and stormed off. Since that day, we hadn't talked much. It seemed like our friends noticed the change too. Due to the rumors spread by Sandra, everyone sided with her. I started being avoided even by friends I was close to and felt isolated even when cheering for Noah's baseball games. Despite that, I wanted to support him, so I tried to act as usual. Cheering loudly for Noah and trying to remain cheerful, I sometimes felt the stinging gazes from others. Yet, I refused to be intimidated by Sandra's threats and continued to stand my ground. I was aware of the rumors about me, mostly spread by her. In a way, that made me even more determined to maintain a strong stance. Then one day, as I was getting ready to leave after the game, Sandra approached me with some friends.
Hi. You're as stubborn as ever. Anyway, I'm hosting a dinner at my house. I've invited all members of the baseball team, so you're welcome to come if you want.
I frowned at her words. I never expected her to invite me, especially given our bad relationship.
I really want you to come. I don't want to continue like this. It's pitiful to see you standing alone. Your son will eventually realize what's happening. Imagine how he'll react when he knows his mother is suffering because of himself. You understand, don't you?
She kept looking at me with her challenging gaze. I simply replied without averting her eyes, "Understood."
That's great. And bring your husband too. It's good for him to socialize as well. Besides, you'd feel uneasy coming alone, right? My husband will be there too, so invite yours. I'll send the details and date in the team chat,"
said she before turning and leaving. The friends around us looked anxious throughout the exchange. After watching Sandra's retreating figure, I was left with a bitter expression. Honestly, I had a bad feeling. It was clear she was plotting something. Therefore, before she could make her move, I decided to take the initiative. The day of the dinner arrived. George had an urgent work commitment, so he was going to be late. I called Sandra early in the morning to let her know. When she heard about George's emergency work, she laughed mockingly and said, "It's sad when children suffer because their parents have low-paying jobs." Her usual sarcasm, you know? After a while of her usual snide remarks, she hung up. I was upset but continued preparing to head to my parents' house, just a few minutes' walk from ours. Since George took my car for work, I decided to borrow a car from my parents. After getting the car, I headed straight to Sandra's place. Approaching the area, I joined a line of friends also driving there. Sandra was directing friends to a parking lot near her house, which she managed, so parking was hassle-free. When it was my turn, Sandra looked surprised at my car. No wonder, since I wasn't in my usual car but my parents' luxury vehicle.
"Ashley! Hey, roll down the window! Why are you in such a luxury car? It's the same model as my family's car. Did you buy it just to compete with me?"
Despite her assertive words, she looked shaken. I rolled down the window and greeted her smiling. "I had to borrow it from my parents."
"Sandra, do you know about my father?"
She scowled at me.
"I wouldn't know anything about a poor family."
"Then I'll introduce you later," I said, driving into the parking lot as instructed. She stood there, mouth agape, watching me leave. "Thank you for the invitation today," I told Sandra after parking, handing her a cake I brought as a gift. On that day, I wasn't in my usual casual attire. I dressed appropriately for her dinner party, including some discreet branded accessories. She bit her lip and confronted me.
"Explain yourself. How can someone like you afford high-end brand accessories and cakes from upscale shops?"
Her loud voice drew the attention of friends around us. Amidst the gathered attention, I calmly answered her questions. "I haven't mentioned it, but I'm the daughter of a film company president. This cake is recommended by my mother for attending your dinner. I chose the clothes myself. Is there a problem?" Her mouth fell open again. She remained frozen for a while before finally speaking in a strained voice.
"A film company? You mean where my husband works?"
Unbelieving, I showed her a family photo with my father, who was also featured on the film company's website, thinking it would convince her. Still, she refused to believe.
"That's a lie. It's just a photo you took when you met somewhere, right? I don't believe it." "So, you rented a luxury car and wore high-end brand clothes, bringing a cake from a famous store, all because of the harassment, right?"
"No, I just chose an outfit and a gift suitable for the occasion. I borrowed the car from my parents because my husband had an urgent job."
A poor person like you being the daughter of a president is just a story, not reality. Stop joking. Do you really want to reconcile with me? I invited you here, offering a chance to apologize."
She yelled hysterically, throwing and stomping on the cake I brought as a gift. I was utterly appalled by her behavior, which was far from someone wanting to reconcile. As her shouting echoed through the yard, a man hurried out from the house, probably worried about her. It was her husband, David. When our eyes met, I smiled at him, which seemed to shock him.
"What? The president's daughter here?"
His surprise prompted Sandra to turn to him sharply. Despite her intimidating demeanor, David politely greeted me.
Good evening, ma'am. I'm David. Nice to meet you. What brings you here today? Anything wrong with the president?
Worried, I turned to him and explained. I was invited by Sandra. His reaction was one of sheer astonishment.
Wow, you two are acquaintances. I didn't know that. The world is indeed small. How did you two meet?
Our sons are on the same baseball team. There was a little conflict when my son replaced your son as a regular, but Sandra invited me here today to make amends. Seems I'm not welcome, though. He then turned to Sandra, suspecting something. Sandra, tell me. The poor person you always talk about is. She started sweating profusely. Seemingly she had been bad-mouthing me at home too. Realizing that, I narrowed my eyes. She got in panic and started to deny everything, clinging to David.
It's not her. She's the daughter of a film company president. It can't be. We're actually good friends, right?
Ignoring her pleading glance, I remained expressionless. After what she had done, I had no intention of saving her face. As I was about to retort, someone tapped my shoulder. When I looked back, there was my husband, George. Sorry for being late. I finished work earlier than I thought, so I came. Is something wrong? He had a suspicious look on his face. He looked at Sandra and David, and it seemed like he had noticed something as he spoke. Remember me? We talked at work recently.
Of course, you're the upcoming president.
Then, George blushed and said, Not sure yet. He scratched his head. Seeing their exchange, Sandra was speechless with shock. I picked up the trampled cake and handed it back to her. Do you believe me now? Visibly shaken, she tried to appease me with an ingratiating tone.
I had no idea of your status. I'm so sorry for everything.
She pleaded, but I shook my head. Don't worry about it. We were never close friends to begin with. There's no point in pretending now. My response visibly shocked her, prompting David to ask in a low tone. What's that about? He said. Frightened, Sandra looked at me with a pale face. Sandra has been making snide remarks to me for a while now. She even complained when our son earned a regular spot on the team, offering to pay for it, and when I refused, she started harassing me. She invited me today to make amends, but it's fine. We're leaving. I laid out Sandra's actions to David, who then glared at her angrily. After sharing a smile with George, we left the scene. Following the incident at Sandra's house, the harassment stopped. Besides, the story spread among the team mothers, isolating her instead. The other mothers, seeing her downfall, suddenly started cozying up to me. I couldn't bring myself to like them though. Fond of being in a group, Sandra might be struggling, but I had no intention of helping. It was all her doing. Eventually, Sandra left the baseball team as her misdeeds were exposed. That caused David to be furious with her. Her access to money was also reduced. Her misconduct became neighborhood gossip. Although they were some exaggerated, given her character, I couldn't help but wonder if some were true. However, when whispers of relief about her not getting divorced circulated, I felt a pang of sympathy. Time passed, and Noah moved up to elementary school. Sandra's son, apparently attending a private school, meant no future interactions between us. Noah continued to excel in baseball, and George and I worked even harder to ensure he could pursue his passion without any hindrance.
Have you been deceiving me all this time? You're the worst. I want a divorce. Learning of my husband's secret, I was naturally furious.
Oh, sure. I don't mind divorcing. Just remember, you're the one who said that. I'm not paying any alimony since you want the divorce.
Despite the cause of the divorce being his fault, his further appalling remarks made me feel sick. Then, an unexpected person spoke up.
Don't get too carried away. Someone like you should just go to hell.
My name is Paige, a 30-year-old office worker. My husband, Claude, a colleague at the company, was always at the center of attention with his bright personality and competence at work. I was secretly admiring him, so I was surprised when he confessed his feelings. There were not a few female employees in other departments aiming for Claude, And behind the scenes, they would say,
Why would he choose someone so plain?
when I later demanded to know why he chose me as a marriage partner, I was so frustrated I nearly lashed out. Claude's family consisted of mom-in-law and a much younger sister-in-law, a family of 3. I heard that his father had passed away from illness a few years ago.
Dad was really strict, you know. He used to yell a lot. Sorry.
Whenever we talk about parents, my husband would look a bit apologetic. That's because I don't have parents. They died in an accident before I was fully aware, and I was raised by my grandparents on my mother's side of the family, who are also no longer with us. The only images I have of my dad and mom are from a few photos shown to me by my grandparents. My favorite is their wedding photo, where they both look so kindly smiling. That picture is always carefully tucked away in my schedule planner. However, I once dropped that photo at work, and Claude, who happened to be passing by, picked it up.
Miss Page, do you always carry around your parents' wedding photo? That's unusual.
That seems to be what started our conversations. When he proposed, he said,
I want to become Page's family from now on.
I was so happy. I cried, not knowing it was all a lie. Mother-in-law Betty and sister-in-law Abby were very kind people. Abby lived in a different state, and we didn't meet often, but she always cared for me during Thanksgiving and Christmas.
Paige, if Claude gets selfish, come talk to me. I'll scold him.
I'm not like Abby. I won't fail at marriage.
This kind of exchange often led to sibling squabbles, which was the usual pattern. While trying to appease them, I felt a little envious that they could have such arguments within the family. I thought our marriage was going quite well, but there was one thing that troubled me. Not this month either. Rubbing my aching back, I murmured to myself. We had been married for a while, but we're still not blessed with children. Every month, with the arrival of my period, I felt downhearted. Claude would comfort me, saying,
This is something only God can give us. Let's keep trying at our own pace.
Once I suggested going to the doctor together, but after he said,
I'm fine. Maybe we can just wait and see.
A year was about to pass. There's no deadline for the body, but now, over 30, I did feel a bit of urgency and found myself sighing more often unconsciously. It was during Thanksgiving that year.
Paige, what's the matter? You just sighed. Don't tell me you had a fight with Claude.
Realizing I had let out a sigh, Abby, my sister-in-law, who was washing dishes next to me, asked with concern, Oh no, it's not a fight. It's just that, well, we've been having trouble having a child. Upon hearing my words, Abby's face turned more serious than I'd ever seen. What? What is it? Is something wrong?
So, what does Claude say about having kids?
Abby, still focusing on the dishes, asked me quietly.
Claude, he says it's a gift from God, but when we got married.
When we got married, I had a talk with Claude. My grandparents were very kind, but I remember feeling envious when my friends talked about their parents. I longed for a family and told my husband I wanted to have children as soon as possible. Claude agreed, saying,
I love kids. I bet our kids would be adorable.
As I spoke, I felt Abby's hand washing with more force.
Have you talked to Mom about this?
Betty? I haven't spoken much about it since it's a sensitive topic, but she has given me advice sometimes, saying, You'll surely get pregnant eventually. My husband and I hadn't been able to report a pregnancy, and Betty never pried into our business regarding children. I knew of friends who became neurotic due to the pressure from their mother-in-laws to produce grandchildren quickly, so I felt blessed with mine. That day, Abby kept a puzzled look on her face and didn't talk much. I wonder if I said something to offend her. That's what I was thinking when I got a message from Abby that night. The message was an apology for her attitude that day. And
I have to visit next week for something. Can we talk then? And please keep this between us, don't tell Claude.
I didn't see any reason to refuse, so I replied, understood. Perhaps there's something she knows about Claude that I don't. It was obvious from Abby's demeanor that day. Lately, I've been having some dissatisfaction with my husband too. Claude had a tendency to look down on others. He'd come home beer in hand and casually badmouth his colleagues, even though I work at the same company. When he talked down about colleagues I got along with, I snapped. Isn't it a bit harsh? Sure, you've outperformed them, but they're still our co-workers. That's not a nice way to talk. He laughed snidely through his nose and said, look, results are everything in this world. I'm contributing to the company with my work. I can't stand being compared to those idiots. There was someone my husband particularly disliked, our boss, Manager Harwood. He had a stern face but was competent and reliable. He was over 40 and single, as far as I knew. However, it seemed Mr. Harwood had recently found a girlfriend. While I thought it was good news, Claude mocked. That gorilla's trying to be stylish, wearing fancy ties recently. Ridiculous. No harm in that? I thought it suited him, I defended. My husband disrespectfully referred to our boss as a gorilla. Mainly, Claude's good performance was because Mr. Harwood had recommended him to take over his clients when he was promoted to manager. Despite being favored, I sensed a nastiness in someone who acted like a good subordinate to your face but spoke ill of you behind your back. You see new sides of people after marrying them? Sides you never knew existed. It's awful, but listening to Abby's story made me seriously consider what to do going forward. I feel indebted to Betty for all the support, and the thought of divorce makes me feel guilty. Back then, the thought of divorce was still crossing my mind regarding Betty. Then came the day we had promised to meet. I was expecting Abby to come alone, but there she was saying,
Sorry, Paige. Look, Mom's here too.
With Betty standing beside her, looking down.
We need to talk, Paige. You still want children, right?
Huh? Yes. I've always wanted children. Betty and I have discussed it, but I haven't been able to bring any good news. I'm sorry. Hearing this, Abby glared at Betty.
Paige, let me be clear. You should leave my younger brother, I mean Claude.
As Abby said this to me, Betty, who had been silent, shouted in a voice louder than I'd ever heard. No way! Divorce? The neighbors will gossip about me again! Her shout made me shudder involuntarily.
So, this is about what Mom wants, right? Have you ever considered Paige's feelings? She's been struggling with not being able to have children. How can you not understand?
By the time I got there, tears were already welling up in Abby's eyes from their argument.
Abby, why do you say I should leave him?
I was out of my depth and could only ask that. Maybe Claude is sick or something? I wasn't foolish. I could tell from their exchange that my husband was probably a hopeless case. Still, I didn't want to face the reality that all the time I had invested might have been in vain. Abby, seeing the discontent on my face, asked,
Do you know why I divorced my ex-husband?
I thought it was just irreconcilable differences. I never pried into someone's divorce reasons, assuming that was all it was. Abby took a deep breath.
You see? I couldn't have children with my ex-husband even after 7 years.
They had gone to the hospital, where tests showed nothing was wrong with either of them. Still, they were told that sometimes pregnancies just don't happen, even after treatment. Eventually, trying for a baby felt like an obligation, and slowly a gap formed between us.
Every time I saw my former mother-in-law, she'd make snide remarks, but no one helped. Then one day, I discovered my ex-husband's affair, and that the woman was pregnant. It was painful to live,
Abby said with a bitter smile. After the affair, Abby and her husband divorced. Her ex-husband was happy to pay the settlement in a divorce court if it meant he could remarry his mistress. After hearing this grim tale, I asked, "Didn't you think about divorcing before things got to that point and returning to your parents' home?" Abby shook her head quietly in response.
This house has always revolved around Claude in a bad way.
According to Abby, Claude had been a problem since childhood, causing their parents-in-law much distress. Their late father-in-law was a strict man, often ending up in physical fights when scolding Claude for his wrongdoings. Betty always coddled Claude, perhaps because he was a late-comer child, and it seemed she never even scolded him. When Claude became a college student, he soon caused a scandal.
Claude got a high school junior pregnant back then. Dad was furious, but Claude said he had no intention of taking responsibility.
Abby shared. Father-in-law went to apologize to the girl's parents, but her husband was noticeably absent. Eventually, the girl chose to keep the baby, and Claude has neither acknowledged it nor paid child support. He seemed to have no interest in his own child that was about to be born. Hearing of my husband's disgraceful behavior made me feel nauseous. Then the entrance door opened.
I'm home. Oh, what's up? Mom and Abby too? Is Paige taking a half holiday today too? Should have invited me.
He said cheerfully, assuming we were out enjoying a meal together. His innocent demeanor irritated me, and I confronted him.
Claude, I heard from Abby. You haven't recognized them, but you do have a child, don't you? What else are you hiding from me?
Claude, who had been laughing joyfully, suddenly turned serious and glared at Abby before heaving a deep sigh.
Look, Paige, you think I'd hide something from you? It's all Abby's made-up stories. She's been mentally unstable since her last marriage. Prone to pathological lying, right? Right? Right, Mom?
He defended. To that, Betty replied with an indecisive,
I'm not sure what to think.
Claude clicked his tongue lightly at Betty's response and said,
Anyway, don't meddle in our marital issues. Hey, Abby, why don't you try a matchmaking party? Even our guerrilla manager found someone, so there's still hope for you.
He was rude, but again laughed as if he was having a good time. Abby just watched Claude quietly and then said,
Claude, you haven't changed a bit. Always lying. Back then, you always had an excuse, saying it was the other person who came on to you.
After saying that, Abby pulled out a voice recording from her pocket.
You lie. But are you stupid too? Your stories never add up. Back then, I started recording our family discussions, you know?
Abby pressed the playback button after saying that. Next to her, Betty reached out with a snarl.
Stop it! Why bring up the old story now? Let's just forget it already.
It's Paige's right to know. She doesn't have to suffer because of a liar like this.
The recording began with the voice of an older man yelling.
What are you thinking? Involving a young girl? And she's still a high school student at that? It's outrageous.
The conversation that followed involved 4 people. The voices other than the older man were familiar, which suggested the angry voice belonged to the now deceased father-in-law. After the shouting, younger sounding words from Claude followed, echoing what Abby had just mentioned. Claude glared at Abby as if to scold her for unnecessary meddling.
Explain yourself with your own words. How many other girls have you hurt by repeating the same actions? And what did an angry dad say to you, huh?
My husband just glared at Abby silently.
Paige, this guy was so bad. Dad yelled to have him castrated. A few months later, he came back smiling, saying he got a vasectomy. Creepy, right?
I was severely shaken by Abby's words. Huh? Vasectomy? That means it meant Claude was practically incapable of reproducing. And he married me without revealing such a critical fact.
The surgery is supposedly for those over 30, but he went out of his way to find a hospital. Where did the money come from? I wonder.
Abby glanced at Betty briefly. Betty was sweating profusely, whether from nervousness or something else. Abby seemed to have thought that I knew about this and had married Claude regardless. But after finding out that I wanted children, she confronted Betty, who had flippantly said,
"Just keep it to yourself. Paige might give up on kids someday. Divorce would be bad for our public image."
So, you'd been deceiving me all this time? You're the worst. I'm going to divorce you. I had struggled with not getting pregnant, and to think he encouraged me. The cause was Claude, and to think Betty knew yet said nothing. I felt on the verge of losing faith in humanity. Seeing my furious state, my husband said,
"Oh, sure, I'm fine with divorcing. But remember, you're the one who said divorce. Don't expect any alimony from me."
Had I known he was this kind of person from the start, I never would have married him. Tears of frustration welled up. Abby had been on my side to the very end.
Enough with your arrogance! Someone like you, an enemy of women, deserves to fall into hell!
Claude ignored Abby's words, and so Claude and I were divorced. I hired a lawyer introduced by Abby and sued Claude. Perhaps he hadn't expected me to go that far, but I managed to get a small amount of settlement money from him. When we divorced, I asked my husband why he married me.
"I just wanted the status of a married man. But family ties and such are a hassle, aren't they? In that regard, you were great. No family. No bothersome relations."
He had said that. I was so angry. I felt like I could explode. I wanted to punch him. After the divorce was finalized, I couldn't stand sharing the same space with Claude and handed my resignation letter to my boss, Mr. Harwood.
Was it? Was it him who caused this?
As that, I quietly nodded.
"There's no need to quit. Can you help out in another department from tomorrow? I'll hold on to this resignation letter for now."
It was the following week when Claude received the transfer orders to the branch office. It was in a remote rural area on the outskirts of the state, a place to which people were sent when they caused problems, though nobody would say it outright. Essentially, this meant Claude had been sidelined from the path to promotion. Claude, seemingly unable to accept this, confronted Mr. Harwood.
"I can't accept this. Why me? Haven't I been performing well? Better than anyone else here."
His colleagues glared at him for such remarks.
"You might have good sales numbers, but what about after that? Do you properly greet the customers? We're getting complaints from clients you've managed. They don't trust the new reps. You also have the highest cancellation rate. These colleagues you look down on are the ones covering for you.
Stammering, Claude could only say,
No, but that's... Besides, this is a company decision. Or can't you take an order from a gorilla?
Claude's face reportedly went pale at Mr. Harwood's words. By the way, I never told Mr. Harwood anything about my ex-husband's bad behavior. Afterward, Claude was transferred to that infamous branch and I was able to return to my original department. All my colleagues were supportive, saying I did well to get rid of such a guy. A year later, I attended Mr. Harwood's wedding. He had met his bride at a marriage hunting party.
Paige, thank you for coming today.
The bride, the day star, approached me.
Abby, long time no see. That dress looks great on you.
As I complimented her, she blushed and said,
It's my second time, and since we're both over 40, I thought just family would be enough, but his parents were so enthusiastic.
Abby laughed shyly. I was truly surprised when I learned that Abby was Mr. Harwood's partner. They were both so shy about their relationship that they kept it secret until the marriage. When Mr. Harwood was pondering Claude's case, he said,
I'm cutting ties with the family, so feel free to do what you must.
Those words seemed to have encouraged him. Indeed, Betty was nowhere to be seen at the wedding. Betty has been mostly homebound ever since. I guess the bad rumors Betty was worried about must have spread in the neighborhood, but she's stranger to me now, so it doesn't matter. While Abby and I chatted, Mr. Horwood's mother came over, saying, Abby, are you feeling okay? Come on, have a seat.
How many months along is the baby now?
Just 4 months. But everyone's so worried, but I'm truly happy. A tear gleamed in Abby's eye.
It's too early to cry,
I said, and we both laughed together. Since then, I've found a new love. He's a high school classmate I reconnected with after a long time, and his parents, whom I met a few times during our student days, are all very kind people. Not long after we started dating, I met his parents again. Unlike me, who felt self-conscious about my divorce history, they were eagerly asking,
So, when's the wedding?
Despite everything, I believe I can finally be happy this time.
Looks like it's goodbye to Granny now, huh? 2 a.m. I caught Rachel muttering to herself and went back to bed puzzled. Rachel, who resented being compared to me for her lack of cooking skills, has always disliked me. Then, out of the blue, Rachel said she'd cook for us. Something felt off. I discreetly swapped my steak with my husband's to avoid suspicion. Then, my husband collapsed, his eyes rolling back, leading to a shocking conclusion. I'm Melissa, 59 years old. I married over 30 years ago. My husband, a banker, is always busy, so I quit my job to focus on homemaking after we got married. Then our son Thomas was born, and life became a whirlwind of parenting and childcare. It was tough at times, but it all flew by in hindsight. Thomas left for college, and now it's just my husband and me. Later, Thomas married Rachel. She's flashy and seems flighty. She's beautiful, but not the kind I'm familiar with, so I rarely initiated conversations. I've seen enough mother-in-law and daughter-in-law conflicts on TV, and thought maintaining a healthy distance was best, so I didn't interfere much in Thomas's marriage. 3 years after Thomas's wedding, during Christmas, Thomas and his wife unexpectedly came to visit. They hadn't before due to his busy schedule, but this year he managed to get leave. Christmas isn't complete without this soup. Thomas relished the soup I made, making me smile. I've always loved cooking, and both Thomas and my husband have always enjoyed my meals. Being praised for my cooking is the best feeling. Man, Mom's cooking is just the best. I'm glad to hear that. Rachel should learn to cook like this.
Hey now!
Thomas, full from eating, laid down and glanced at Rachel. It was a light joke, but Rachel's expression hardened. Thomas, don't say that. It's nice enough she's here. Ah, but Rachel never cooks. Stop exaggerating. No, really, she doesn't cook. It's always supermarket meals or delivery. Tasty, but gets old. I was stunned. Not once since you got married? Yeah. 3 years into their marriage and not a single meal cooked? Unbelievable. The only thing she cooks is instant ramen, right? Thomas said, laughing crudely, a bit drunk. He was just teasing a bit. Rachel glared at me fiercely and silently left the room. Such sensitivity. Even if he was drunk, saying that in front of in-laws must have been upsetting. Feeling helpless, I followed Rachel. She sat on the stairs at the end of the hallway. Rachel, I'm sorry about Thomas. He means no harm, but he's not great at reading the room.
What do you want? Is that sarcasm?
Her voice was lower than usual, which made me feel a bit constricted. I didn't mean it like that. Sure, I was surprised to hear you don't cook. But nowadays, you can easily get food without cooking at home, and women don't have to cook, right?
You say that, but mock me in your heart.
That's not true. I intended it as reassurance, but it seemed to backfire with Rachel glaring at me.
It's really annoying, you know, pretending to be nice. You make me feel uncomfortable with all your cooking. It comes off as so patronizing.
I was taken aback by her words. It had been a while since Thomas had come home, and it was Rachel's first time visiting with him. I had put extra effort into cooking, not realizing it was making her uncomfortable. I'm sorry, I didn't realize you felt that way.
I really don't like that attitude. Can you just leave me alone?
Rachel stormed back into the living room after yelling. I was so shocked by her strong words that I couldn't move for a while. I thought our relationship with Rachel would become distant, but she came alone a few weeks later. What brings you here today?
What? I can't come to my in-laws' house unless I have a reason?
No, it's not that, but I was surprised and flustered by Rachel's confrontational attitude. I didn't think I had been rude. A heaviness settled in my chest. Rachel walked in as if she owned the place and went straight to my husband.
Robert, long time no see.
Oh, good to see you.
I remembered you liked these cookies when I passed by the store, so I bought some for you.
Is that so? Thanks. Melissa, make some coffee.
Yes. I was taken aback by Rachel's fawning voice towards my husband, so different from her attitude towards me. Apparently, they had gotten close during Christmas when I was busy with housework. As I made coffee, feeling uneasy, they were chatting happily.
Wow, being a banker is impressive, especially back in the day, right?
Well, I guess I did earn more than most of my classmates.
Amazing! Must have been tough, harder than now, huh?
My husband laughed shallowly at her obvious flattery. Not wanting to see my husband pleased by a young woman's adulation, I left to go shopping. When I returned, Rachel's shoes were still there. I could hear their conversation from the hallway and couldn't help but listen in.
Thanks for the money. It's a big help.
No problem. Just ask if you're in trouble again. Hopefully your mom's surgery goes well.
Yes, thank you. I should head back. It's getting late.
I bumped into Rachel as she was leaving the living room. Surprised by her sudden appearance, I was more concerned about their conversation. Is your mom having surgery?
What? Eavesdropping? That's the worst.
I didn't mean to listen. I just overheard. Is everything okay? It's none of your business, Melissa. I felt the need to hold her back. Something felt off. You borrowed money from my husband, right? I can't just ignore that. Can you not? Yes, I borrowed it because my mom needs surgery, and we don't have the money. What's it to you? Are we done here? What kind of illness? When is the surgery? It must be hard, right? Just stop it already. Rachel stubbornly refused to give details. I had never heard about Rachel's mom being ill. I thought Thomas would have mentioned something if there was an issue. Suddenly coming over with my husband's favorite treats and borrowing money, it seemed like she might be up to something bad. I felt bad for suspecting Rachel, but I couldn't help it. Yet I had no proof. Unable to hold back the angrily departing Rachel, I let her go with loud footsteps. Pursuing it further seemed pointless, as she wouldn't answer anything. That day, I just sent Thomas an email expressing concern about Rachel's mom. After that, Rachel started visiting once or twice a month. She always came when my husband was home and treated me coldly. Melissa, why don't you go shopping or something? She would suggest, trying to send me away. I wondered what they talked about, but didn't want to show my distrust openly, as it might worsen the relationship with Rachel. I didn't want to upset Thomas, so I silently left for shopping. However, if I returned early, she would complain and clearly treat me as an intruder. I couldn't help but suspect something was going on. But my husband evaded my questions, and I couldn't understand what Rachel was up to. Then one day, something changed. Thomas and Rachel came over late at night, saying they wanted to cook.
Rachel wants to try cooking, and not just for me, but for Dad too. It's late, but they need to prepare. Could we stay over tonight?
Of course, you're always welcome. While my husband welcomed Thomas and his wife, I felt uneasy. Rachel, who hated me and hadn't cooked for 3 years, suddenly wanting to cook for us? I noticed Rachel giving me a creepy, meaningful smile when only I could see. Her eerie smile made my heart race. Not just Rachel's expression, but Thomas's face also caught my attention. He seemed lost in thought, only half listening to Rachel. I had a bad feeling about this. It was late, so I went to bed after a bath. However, I couldn't sleep and got up to use the bathroom, hearing voices from the kitchen. It was 2 a.m., a time when everyone should be asleep. Could it be a ghost? Fearing the worst, I peeked into the kitchen and saw Rachel standing there. Looks like it's goodbye to Granny now, huh? I couldn't make out her words clearly as she whispered to herself. Suspicious of Rachel talking alone in the shadows, I didn't want to start a fight at this hour and disturb my husband or Thomas, so I quietly returned to the bedroom. The next morning, Rachel was eagerly cooking in the kitchen. Can I help with anything? No, I'm doing this alone, so don't come into the kitchen. But there's cleaning up to do. I said I'm fine. Being chased out of the kitchen, I returned to the living room. It all seemed very suspicious. Why was she so adamant about keeping me out of the kitchen? And I couldn't stop thinking about the previous night's incident. Was she planning something? The anxiety was unbearable. And what Rachel cooked was steak.
Steak for breakfast. This is luxurious.
Both my husband and Thomas were surprised. They probably didn't expect Rachel to make steak after practicing cooking. Rachel brought 4 steaks to the table. That's when I noticed something odd. On my plate was different. This plate wasn't from our house, so Rachel must have brought it. Maybe she brought it just for today, as she usually doesn't cook. But why didn't she buy the same design for everyone? This is for you, Melissa. The steak Rachel handed me confidently didn't look different from the others, but I felt there must be a reason my plate was different. Thank you. My husband and Thomas didn't suspect anything, their stomachs rumbling at the sight.
Right, I'll add some spices.
Can you help me bring the soup then? Sure, of course. Thomas went to the kitchen with Rachel. My husband stood up from the sofa. I'll go to the bathroom before eating. Everyone left the living room, leaving me alone. That's when I secretly swapped my steak with my husband's. I just didn't feel like eating it. When Thomas, Rachel, and my husband returned, they sat down without noticing the switch. Let's eat. Just as my husband was about to eat, Rachel shouted, Wait, that's Melissa's! But it was too late. My husband had already taken a big bite. What's wrong, Rachel? It doesn't matter whose steak it is, right? Well... While watching Rachel panic, my husband started choking. I turned to him alarmed. Robert, what's wrong? Robert? He was groaning in pain, his eyes rolling back. I was in shock, only able to call out to him. But Thomas calmly called an ambulance. They arrived quickly after we explained the situation, and my husband was rushed to the hospital. I joined him in the ambulance, and Thomas and his wife followed in their car. My husband was immediately taken to the treatment room. A few hours later, Dr. Anderson informed us he was stabilized after a stomach wash. Dr. Anderson spoke to us with a serious face. Did he ingest anything unusual before collapsing? He ate a steak just before. Was it store-bought? No, Rachel made it. I see. Dr. Anderson fell silent with a puzzled look. Then, looking at us gravely, he said, Actually, we found components of rodenticide in his vomit. Rodenticide? Rachel, what's the meaning of this? Thomas confronted Rachel. Her face turned pale and she broke out in a cold sweat. I don't know. It must have been Melissa. She was alone before eating. I don't have rodenticide. And it would be hard to add it without being caught in just a moment. You can't know until you try. It wasn't me. Rachel was clearly panicking and looked guilty to anyone. If Rachel did it, her actions in the night and the different plate for me all made sense. Then let's call the police. What? Why would you do that? Is everything at home untouched, Thomas? Yeah, we left immediately and didn't touch anything. Thomas nodded seriously. Then the police can determine if rodenticide was really mixed in the steak and who did it. But we don't need to go that far, do we? Not necessary? Do you really think so? It could have been fatal. I couldn't help but get emotional. The thought that my husband could have died from such a trivial matter was unforgivable. The police will find where the rodenticide came from and whose fingerprints are on it. No, police, please! Why are you refusing so much? You didn't do it, right, Rachel? Pressed by me, Rachel crumpled to the floor, messing up her hair. It was me. I did it. She must have realized she couldn't escape and confessed, glaring at me fiercely. Rachel, I never thought you'd do something like this. Wait, don't misunderstand. I didn't mean for Robert to eat it, but then... Rachel clung to Thomas in panic. But his look only grew colder. So you were trying to kill my mom. I wasn't trying to kill anyone. I just wanted a little revenge. Revenge? Thomas scowled while Rachel started making excuses like a child. Because Thomas compared me to Melissa and said hurtful things about not being able to do housework. All this harassment over that? That's not just something. I was really hurt, and Melissa mocked me for not being able to cook, like it was an insult. I had enough. It wasn't that bad, right? You hardly ever visited home. Only last Christmas. When could Mom harass you? Well, that's... Rachel struggled to find words, her eyes darting around. Rachel, you've been coming to our house almost every month, haven't you? Haven't you told Thomas? What? What are you talking about? You and my husband always seem to enjoy talking together. I was often out because you treated me poorly. I don't know what you talked about, but... What are you talking about? I don't know anything about that. It seemed she hadn't told Thomas about her visits, and she was visibly shaken. But Thomas remained calm.
If you were harassed and uncomfortable, why not just avoid visiting home?
I haven't been to your home.
That's a lie.
Thomas firmly stated, to which Rachel looked bewildered. Do you believe Melissa over me, Thomas?
Yeah.
What? What's wrong with you, you mama's boy? I hate you, Thomas. Rachel screamed like a child throwing a tantrum. I watched her in disbelief as she stomped the ground in anger. You're supposed to love me, then listen to me.
That's impossible.
Rachel's eyes widened in shock at Thomas's calm response. Why not?
Did your mom's surgery go well?
What? What are you talking about?
I asked Mom. You said you needed money from Dad for your mom's surgery, right?
Rachel glared at me accusingly. You told on me?
Don't blame everything on Mom. I was bothered that you never consulted me, so I called your family. Your mom is fine.
I was so surprised that I could only stare at Thomas. Rachel was sweating profusely.
I suspected something and had a detective agency investigate you. You're having an affair, aren't you?
What? I gasped at the shocking revelation. Thomas pulled out several photos from his bag. Photos of Rachel walking hand in hand with an unknown man looking happy.
You've been giving this man several expensive gifts, haven't you?
Rachel, were you using the money from Robert to give gifts to your lover?
It seems she was using the money from Dad for her affair. And because Mom was at home, Rachel feared Dad would find out, so she wanted her out of the way.
Rachel just looked down, her silence confirming it. No wonder she wanted me out of the house. Thinking I'd be out of the way, Rachel must have thought it would be easier to borrow money from my husband.
A few days ago, I received the investigation results and was planning to talk about it, but before I could, Rachel started saying she wanted to cook for us. I thought I'd talk after that, but I never expected this.
I understood why Thomas had looked troubled when I visited. He had been suspecting and agonizing over Rachel's affair.
I can't continue with Rachel. I'll be filing for divorce.
Rachel went silent, sniffling. With all the evidence against her, she had nothing to say, but her demeanor changed at Thomas's next words.
Let's go to the police together.
What? Why would that happen?
You should pay for what you've done.
Crime? It didn't kill anyone, so it's fine, right? I was appalled that Rachel didn't understand the gravity of her cruel and dangerous actions.
If such things are acceptable, then there's no need for police. What you did is unforgivable.
No! Why would you do this to me? I'm remorseful. I'm not going to the police. Rachel screamed in a high-pitched voice. She resisted as Thomas tried to take her outside the hospital room, both of us at a loss. Then it happened.
Rachel.
A hoarse voice came from the bed, and we turned to see my husband awake. Robert, are you okay? I was so worried.
Stop lying. I heard everything.
She tried to win over my husband, probably hoping he'd take her side. But my husband acted first. What are you?
It seems I've been used by you.
That's not true.
I'm not angry, though.
My husband was still weak, looking at the ceiling and speaking slowly. Rachel visibly relaxed at his words. Robert, I'm so sorry. I swear I won't do it again. Thank you for forgiving me. She held his hand, smiling. I felt nauseated seeing her smile after all she had done. It makes me laugh a lot when I do things like that. I couldn't forgive her, even if my husband did. As I was about to protest, my husband whispered to Rachel,
I haven't forgiven you. Go to the police and pay for your crimes.
What? Why? You just said you weren't angry. Why do I have to go to the police?
I'm not angry about the money, but I'll never forgive you for trying to feed Melissa that.
Rachel was shocked to see my husband angry for the first time.
You'll pay for this crime for the rest of your life."
Realizing she had no allies, Rachel slumped down, defeated. Then she screamed. "Ah! It's all your fault. If you weren't here, none of this would have happened. I'll never forgive you." "Stop acting like a child. Even if I wasn't here, you would have been caught eventually. The affair, the money, it's all your fault." "Shut up!" Rachel cried, repeating that she didn't want to go to the police, but no one sympathized with her. "I'll never forgive you for deceiving my husband and what you put him through." Rachel started crying again. She looked desperate, a far cry from her usual confident, sarcastic self. Thomas, unmoved, took Rachel's hand and led her out of the room. The police investigation revealed that the steak my husband ate was soaked in a large amount of water-dissolved rodenticide. It was hidden in our kitchen drawer, and only Rachel's fingerprints were on it, leading to her arrest. She confessed she thought the strong taste wouldn't be detected in the steak. After being bailed out, Rachel tried to turn to her lover, but he cut ties with her after learning about her crimes. Left with no one to turn to, Rachel resorted to working as a hostess. But at her age, it wasn't easy to earn, and she often got into trouble, drinking until she passed out. I was disgusted by Rachel's pathetic state and relieved we had cut ties with her. My husband, fortunately, was discharged and is living well. Although he's developed an aversion to steak, likely due to trauma, thankfully, that's the extent of his trauma, he still enjoys my cooking, and our meals together are our greatest joy. Thomas divorced and took some time to heal, but he's now dating a wonderful woman. She visited us a few times, a modest and homely lady. I sincerely hope for a bright and happy future for Thomas and his new family.
Is that all you've got? Nancy looked down at me with disdain, and I felt my stomach churn, but I held it in. She seemed unaware of my discomfort as she whispered something into James' ear. Annoyed by my gaze, James pushed Nancy aside and confronted me. "What's your problem? Don't take it out on us just because you're not talented." Seeing James puff himself up like that only made me feel worse, but I chose to remain silent. Arguing with him would only bring me down to his level.
If only we'd put James in charge from the start instead of you clinging to pointless pride.
Nancy sneered, and that's when I lost my temper. "All right then, why don't you tell me what's so crucial about running a company?" I'd been ignoring their issues up until now, but being directly attacked like this was more than I could take. At this point, I had to raise my voice against James and Nancy, who wouldn't hesitate to treat employees like disposable pawns if it served their purpose. Dumbfounded, James had nothing to say, so I turned to Nancy. "If you have any intention of supporting James as his wife, you can at least offer that advice, can't you?" Caught off guard, Nancy was at a loss for words, her eyes darting around aimlessly. "My name is Emma. I am a 32-year-old single woman who runs a company. My family has been in the business since my grandfather Robert's time, and he's now retired and enjoying his life. My dad, Richard, was supposed to take over the business, but he had other ambitions and chose not to. I have a partner named James, but like Richard, he's always following his passion instead of joining the family business. Richard became a world-renowned musician, and in his stead, I now run the company founded by Robert. We grew up in a fairly affluent household, but our lifestyle is anything but extravagant. Robert always says, "Once you raise your standard of living, it's almost impossible to lower it. You'll just keep wanting more and it will be irreversible." Having lived through this himself, it's become something of a family motto. Even though Robert has had great success running a business, and Richard is a successful musician, our family's lifestyle hasn't changed a bit. Birthdays, school admissions, graduations. We might splurge a little on special occasions, but you won't find us driving luxury cars or surrounded by designer brands all the time. The extra money usually goes back into the business or is donated to good causes. For me, living modestly has just become second nature. I don't flaunt my family's business achievements to old school friends either. To be honest, back when I was in high school, I casually told a boyfriend that my family was well off. His attitude changed overnight. He started expecting high-end gifts to his birthday, and suddenly, I was the one paying for everything on our dates. I was hesitant to talk about our financial situation after that, especially since I was getting my allowance from my mom, Jennifer. I didn't want to attract people who were just after my money. At the time, I was working for Robert's company. I never disclosed that I was Robert's grandchild and was treated the same as any other employee. I kept it that way to avoid jealousy and gossip in the office. Then one day, James introduced us to a woman named Nancy, who later became his wife. Richard was away on a world tour as a musician at that time, so it was Jennifer and Robert who welcomed her. Based on what I heard after getting back from work, Robert wasn't impressed, and neither was Jennifer. However, Richard later said it was all good if they were in love. Nancy eventually became my sister-in-law. Fast forward to a New Year's celebration, James and Nancy visited our family home. Richard also happened to be home, making it a full house of 6. Somehow, the topic shifted to my salary, and James and Nancy started criticizing me.
Why is your salary so low, Emma?
You're the grandchild of the boss. You should have a lot more sway. By that time, Robert, who normally would have put James in his place, had already gone to bed. Jennifer was busy preparing soup in the kitchen. Richard, who wasn't fully aware of my current situation, simply watched our exchange quietly. I make it what I make because I'm still learning. It's as simple as that. Taking into account that I was already making a higher salary than those who'd been at the company longer, just because I'm the CEO's grandchild, I had a heated argument with the ever-complaining James. Just because I get special treatment doesn't mean it's worth anything if I can contribute to the company. Plus, having extra money doesn't make sense if you have no use for it.
Come on, there's plenty of ways to use money. Shouldn't you be more considerate of us?
I frowned at Nancy's argument, not really understanding her point. I glanced at Richard, but he was engrossed in watching TV, so I couldn't gauge his reaction. Honestly, I'm satisfied with my current salary and don't have any complaints about my working conditions, mostly because I can buy anything I want. However, it seemed like James and his wife weren't pleased with what I was saying. Despite the family tension during the New Year's celebration, I kept my work and personal life separate and tackled my job responsibilities diligently after the holiday. A few days after returning to work, I was taking a short break at home when James called. When I answered, he apologized for the previous disagreement.
Sorry about the other day. Got carried away being back home after so long. Money isn't everything, you know. Nancy always says she's sorry for overstepping.
I was left speechless by James' subdued apology. It was true that James and Nancy had both been drinking that night, and being back home after so long probably made them bolder than usual. I was bothered by Nancy's words, but since they seemed repentant, I decided to let it go this time. From then on, I poured myself into my work even more and enjoyed a fulfilling life. Eventually, my hard work started paying off, and there were even talks of a promotion. When I got home, Robert was waiting for me at the entrance, and I was summoned to his room.
You've been working hard, it seems. It's about time I started teaching you my responsibilities. Plan on taking over the company eventually, and stick with me.
Hearing these words, I felt invigorated. I had studied economics in college to prepare myself for eventually taking over the company. My efforts to not only improve my department, but the entire company were finally bearing fruit. Still, being told about taking over the company sooner than I had expected left me somewhat shaken. I had no time to dwell on it, as Robert immediately began mentoring me intensively. Engrossed in absorbing all the knowledge he was imparting, I had completely forgotten about James and Nancy. After my days of intense training with Robert, I was worn out every time I came home. But soon, Robert retired.
Emma, you've done well. I trust that you can take it from here. Do your best.
With that, he built an annex on the property and is now enjoying his leisurely retirement. A while after I officially took over the company, James called me again.
Emma, I got something to discuss with you.
Feeling a sense of unease, I listen as James starts talking apologetically.
Hey, I need a favor. It's Nancy's birthday this month and...
James tells me he wants to get Nancy a birthday gift. For the past few years, he's managed to scrape something together. But this year, he found an accessory that would be perfect for Nancy and he really wants to give it to her. He didn't look for other gifts, but he couldn't shake the thought of that accessory. Basically, he wants to borrow money. But if it's for Nancy's birthday gift, I can say no. It's around $300, so I happily agree. Not long after, I get a call from Nancy. I'm surprised as this is rare. I answer, and she's thanking me for the gift. James must have told her that I helped him out. I couldn't help but find it endearing that he told her, even if he didn't have to.
So here's the thing,
she says.
We're planning a trip together, but we're a little short on cash. Can you help us out? We'll pay you back quickly.
Feeling this might be a high-value return gift for what I did for James, I happily agree again. After that, the couple started asking to borrow money from me for all sorts of things. At first, it was easy to say yes. But as time went on, their attitude changed and the amount started to increase. Finally, losing trust in the couple, I ignored a new call from Nancy. Then I get incessant calls from both James and Nancy. Annoyed, I finally pick up a call from Nancy, and the first thing she does is yell at me.
Why aren't you picking up? I've been calling you over and over.
Let me guess, Nancy, you need money again? Silenced for a moment, her voice raises again.
What's that tone? I'm spending the money so it won't go to waste in your business, you know?
That makes no sense. You're spending my money. Frustrated, she raises her voice even further.
Emma, how much are you making a year?
Suspicious, I answer.
Right now, I'm only making around $30,000. I just started in my position.
Hearing that, Nancy snorts and her attitude inflates.
That's what you get for being so showy and not letting James take over the business.
Letting James taking over the business? What is she talking about? James told everyone he didn't want to take over Robert's company, opting to move out and chase his dream of becoming a musician. So why are we even talking about James? Before I could muster up a response, she said,
Look, I need $5,000 by the day after tomorrow. Make sure it's ready.
She hung up without waiting for a reply, and the room fell silent. I used to give her up to $2,000, but now she's demanding $5,000 all of a sudden. What's more, her whole attitude and comments like, be more considerate, were irking me, so I decided to go to Robert, who was in a separate building. I told Robert everything, and he let out a deep sigh. I knew I was going to get scolded for lending money too easily.
Richard has musical talent. That's why I let him do his thing. James, however, has nothing. Even if he joined a company, he wouldn't amount to anything. I always knew it.
For a moment, I wondered what they were talking about. then realized it was about Richard and James. Sure enough, the choices Richard and James made are similar. Neither of them took over Robert's company, and both of them are interested in something music related. But the crucial difference was their willingness to work hard. Richard thought for himself, brainstormed, and searched for the best ways to achieve what he wanted. James, on the other hand, simply copied Richard and chose to pursue music because he didn't want to work. I knew Richard had succeeded while James was still struggling.
I also never liked James' wife, just so you know,
Robert said, sighing and holding his head in his hands.
Emma, listen carefully. You need to do exactly as I say from now on.
Confused, I nodded and clenched my teeth, imagining what would unfold next. First, I contacted Richard. Luckily, he was still in the States, and he promised to align his plans after I explained the situation. Next, I spoke to Jennifer. She listened quietly, her eyes downcast, but nodded firmly when I finished talking. I then prepared for the next day, waking up with mixed feelings. The following morning, I went to the bank to withdraw the money before heading to the office. I settled into my still unfamiliar office chair, took a deep breath, and reached out to James. After a while, I received a message that James and his wife were causing a commotion in the reception area, so I invited them into my office.
Emma, what do you mean you won't support us anymore?
James immediately yelled at me. I gestured for them to sit, but both James and his wife continued yelling without taking a seat. I let out a sigh and moved to the reception area's couch, placing an envelope quietly on the table. Immediately, Nancy sat on the couch across from me and checked the contents of the envelope.
Hey, this isn't enough. What's the deal?
Hearing this, James sat next to Nancy, and they both examined what was inside the envelope.
Wait, why is this only half? We agreed on 5,000, didn't we?
That's right. The envelope only contained half of the money they had demanded. As for the amount, Robert had told me to decide on the final severance package myself.
This is the best I can do. I can't afford to give any more.
Upon hearing this, James and Nancy scoffed at me.
That's it? This is not doing so well?
Ignoring my annoyed expression, Nancy whispered something in James' ear. Not liking the look in my eyes, James shoved Nancy aside and confronted me.
Don't take your lack of business skills out on us.
Rather than respond, I chose to remain silent, not wanting to stoop to their level.
If you had left the company to James from the start, none of this would have happened,
Nancy sneered. At that point, my patience snapped. There's no way James, who shrinks employment to pursue music and leans on parental privilege, could manage a business. Add to that their parasitic lifestyle, living off me, and now trying to depend on Robert's company.
If you're going to say that, I hope you understand what's important in running a business.
Normally, I'd let things slide to avoid issues, but even I have my limits. Outraged by James and Nancy's self-serving attitude, treating employees like pawns, I finally raised my voice. I looked at James, whose mouth was agape, then turned to Nancy.
If you plan on supporting James as his wife, I hope you can at least give some sound advice.
Nancy, who never expected the conversation to turn on her, stuttered and said nothing.
Neither wanting to join Robert's company nor working hard like Richard, I can entrust my business to people like you? The money I can give is all I have. Why don't you come over tonight?
I said that and kicked James and Nancy out of the office, then returned to my own. I apologized to the employee who came to check on the commotion and refocused on the day's work. That night, James and his wife happily showed up. But when they found Robert wearing an almost devilish expression, Richard completely poker-faced, and Jennifer, who had her back turned to everyone.
Sit wherever you like, okay?
I said.
taking a seat at the kitchen table and gesturing for James and his wife to do the same. Instead, they chose to sit formally on their knees in front of the living room sofa where Robert and Richard were sitting. Clearly, they were putting on airs, but didn't dare to act disrespectful in front of Robert. Next to speak was Richard.
James, Nancy, what are your plans for the future?
Caught off guard by Richard's words, James and his wife exchanged bewildered glances and said nothing.
James!
When Richard called out his name, James visibly flinched and cautiously looked up.
When will you be making your debut, James?
It looked like James couldn't comprehend the question, staring blankly at Richard. Richard said no more, just holding James in his gaze.
Nancy?
Growing impatient, Robert spoke up, addressing Nancy, whose face paled under the weight of his words.
Do you really think the company will do better under James than Emma? And if so, why?
Nancy had no answer and looked down in silence. For a while, no one said anything. The only sound was Jennifer cooking in the background. Eventually, an array of dishes lined in the kitchen counter, and Jennifer took a satisfied breath.
All right, James, Nancy, come on over. Let's eat before it gets cold.
At Jennifer's words, everyone gathered in the kitchen and quietly took their seats. The tense meal commenced, and even Jennifer's usually delicious cooking seemed to lack flavor. After we finished eating and Richard and I were clearing the table, Jennifer served coffee. She placed cups in front of Robert and James and his wife, then took a seat next to Robert.
How was your last supper, James?
What? Jennifer, what are you talking about?
Starting today, you are no longer our son, James. And Nancy, sorry, but please stay away from this house and from Emma. That includes her company as well.
Ignoring my startled glance back, Richard starts doing the dishes. Robert sits in silence, sipping his coffee. Sure, I had asked Jennifer to scold James, but I never expected this. Unfazed by our astonishment, Jennifer continues.
We've been lenient with James because of Richard, but that was a mistake. I thought it was just a phase. James asking for increasingly expensive gifts each year, but it turns out I was wrong.
Jennifer locks eyes with James, who lowers his gaze and shrugs his shoulders.
And Nancy, you love brand name items, don't you? We don't live that sort of lifestyle here. You better work hard to earn them yourself.
Upon closer inspection, Nancy, clad in luxury brands that even I've heard of, awkwardly shrinks into herself.
So that's how it is? Use the money you got from Emma wisely and just leave?
With that, Jennifer exits the kitchen. Richard finishes cleaning up and heads upstairs. Robert drains his cup of tea, washes it in the sink, and goes back to the annex. I observe James and his wife for a moment, sigh, and decide to retreat to my room. Almost immediately, I hear arguing voices from the kitchen, but I chose to ignore them. I hear the front door close, so I plan for tomorrow's work, and finally the house grows quiet. It seems James and his wife have left. In the end, they ended up divorcing. James, who had been chasing a dream of becoming a musician, had no stable income. Nancy, for her part, had been financially reliant on her own parents. Their situation reached a breaking point. Both were disowned, and at first, Nancy juggled part-time jobs while living with James, but their unsustainable lifestyle caught up to them, and their marriage crumbled under the weight of debt. As for James, he seems to have come to terms with his limitations and has given up his musician dreams. He is now working as a day laborer to repay his debts. James and I were raised in the same environment. Our family was well off, but frugal. James had been unhappy for a long time about our lifestyle, fueled by the illusion that, like Richard, he could achieve wealth without traditional employment. So he chose to live frivolously, being taken care of after marriage. Unfortunately for Nancy, she had married James hoping for a slice of the pie, and this is how it ended. I don't understand how someone could think that way, but it seems that James lacks the qualities of a good manager and doesn't have Richard's talents. His choice to avoid hard work led to his disownment and divorce. As for me, I'd been diligently doing what I can, improving performance even before Robert's retirement. The employees also seem happy, so for now, I'm relieved. I haven't seen James or Nancy since, but that doesn't matter. I am too absorbed in my work to care. I plan to continue pushing forward, growing the company.